Hello. 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 Mic test, mic test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Can you guys hear me? Is the mic okay? How is the sound and how is the stream quality? Ok, chắc là được rồi. Eisei mong là chất lượng của mic ngày hôm nay nó sẽ không có vấn đề gì. Ok. Hôm nay mình mệt nên là đọc cho mình dễ ngủ nhé. Ok, judgment. Xin chào YouTube, các bạn ở trên YouTube và các bạn ở trên Discord. Comrade Leaf, vòng nghỉ ship, chúc Eisei live vui vẻ, mình đã đi làm chơi rồi. Ok. Vấn đề emoji ở trên Discord vẫn chưa xong, tại vì Eisei không biết cái đấy làm thế nào. Kiểu có hỏi một số bạn ở trong group lẫn cả các bạn staff thì cũng có đưa, nhưng mà Eisei kiểu khoan từ add ở đâu các thứ. Thế nên những người dùng Discord để chat thì xin lỗi các bạn. Có gì Eisei sẽ cố gắng khắc phục cái đấy nhanh nhất có thể. Ok. Còn ở trên từ BGM tí nữa Eisei chuyển sau, còn đâu bây giờ đang bật tạm thôi. Vậy thì chúng ta tiếp tục với các ritual thường làm nhé. Ok. Welcome to the Eisei Observatory. Chào mừng đã tới đài thiên văn của Eisei. Yokoso eiseitenmondai. 今日はいい天気ですね。はい。Rất là hợp để chúng ta có thể ngồi đọc truyện xong rồi cùng thử thách sanity của chúng ta. Ok. Vậy thì chào Comrade Weed nè, chào Monkey Ship nè, chào You Try nè, Okakoro, chào Nguyễn Đức. Message retracted. Xin chào Phạm Cao Thiên, xin chào Goose Flying, xin chào Leo Kobayashi, xin chào Dark Cordian, xin chào Trashman, xin chào còn ai nữa nhỉ? Xin chào Tunat Raya, xin chào Lolitesu, xin chào Gears Lover, xin chào Trung Lê Tuấn Anh, xin chào Norita Kesato và xin chào bạn Nguyễn Cường. Mong mọi người hôm nay có một ngày vui vẻ. Hôm nay đã là thứ 6 rồi đó. Ở một số nơi thì có khi bây giờ đã là gần sang ngày thứ 7 rồi. Thì mong các bạn lại tiếp tục có một cuối tuần vui vẻ. Ok, chào Nido. Mong là mình đọc hết rồi. Ok, chào Saya ở trên Discord. Ok. Như còn nói thì là hôm nay lẫn cả tuần trước là có làm một cái poll, một cái khảo sát ý kiến nho nhỏ đối với cả mọi người đã tham gia stream vào tuần trước. Thì sau khi chọn giữa đọc Hoàng tử bé, ASMR hay đọc Kinh Thánh thì có rất là nhiều người đã chọn Call of Cthulhu. Thế nên lẫn cả tuần này là thời gian chúng ta nghỉ sau khi chơi một đống game Metro rồi, nên là hôm nay chúng ta cùng thử thách sanity của chính mình nào. Không biết mọi người đã sẵn sàng chưa nhỉ? Ok. Vậy thì chúng ta cùng luân thời transition. Hôm nay mới thứ 5, hôm nay thứ 6 không? Với một số người thì hôm nay vẫn là thứ 5. Yeah, ok, transition. What to do? Yep, okay. Okay. We are now outside of the observatory, like usual. This is the usual place where we talk and chill with the music and me playing ukulele with you guys to sing. I think it is a great location to read the story since it's outside and we can observe the whole universe from here. Yeah. Không có gì cho hậu cả tháng 4 à? Không. Ok. Vậy thì Ok, có một cái phải hỏi trước với mọi người muốn Eisei dùng giọng bình thường như thế này hay là mọi người muốn Eisei bật reverb lên là để âm vang, là sẽ như thế này này. Hello, mic test, mic test, mic test. The God of Cthulhu, found among the papers of the late Francis Wayland Thorson of Boston. Which one is okay? Cái nào sẽ hợp với mọi người luôn? Cho tiếng lửa trại lớn hơn xíu. Ok, ok, tiếng lửa trại lớn hơn xíu. Được chưa? Được chưa? Được chưa? Được chưa? Is this okay? Có muốn bật reverb không hay là để mình tắt đi? Hit object chưa nhỉ? Ok, ok, thế có nghĩa là dùng reverb đúng không? Ok, vậy thì hôm nay chúng ta sẽ stream với reverb. Xin nói trước là EC có khi là sau mỗi một chapter thì là mình sẽ dừng lại một chút để còn đọc comment của mọi người, hoặc là kiểu đọc xong một trang hay như thế nào đó, thì tại vì còn tương tác mọi người nữa, nếu không EC chỉ có đọc và mọi người chỉ có nghe thì nó hơi có vấn đề một chút. Ok, why not both? Đọc bằng reverb cho phê. Ok, ok, đang bật reverb rồi đó. Mic test, mic test. Okay, okay. Mrs. Ngọc Đạn. Actually, ở trong tên của AC có một chữ Ngọc ở trong đấy. Nói thế thôi. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Let us start descending into the night, shall we? The Call of Cthulhu, found among the papers of the late Francis Wayland Thorson of Boston by H.P. Lovecraft. Chapter 1. The Horror in Clay. Of such great power or beings, there may be conceivably a survival of a huge remote period when conscious was manifest, perhaps in shapes and forms long since withdrawn before the tide of advancing humanity, forms of which poetry and legends alone have caught a flying memory and called them gods, monsters, mythical beings of all sorts and kinds. Algernon Blackwood. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to tolerate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us a little, but some day the piecing together of disorganized knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position threehand that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the space and safety of a new dark age. Theosophists have guessed at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle, revered in our world and human rage, form transient incidents. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms which would freeze the blood if not masked by a blunt optimism. But it is not from them that there came the single glimpse of forbidden eons which chills me when I think of it and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flash out from an ancient piecing together of separate things. In this case, an old newspaper item and the note of a dead professor. I hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. Certainly, if I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a change. I think that the professor, too, intended to keep silence regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had no sudden death seized him. My knowledge of the thing began in the winter of 1926-27 with the death of my grand-uncle George Gamel Angel, Professor Emeritus of Semitic Language in Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Angel was widely known as an authority on ancient inscriptions and had frequently been restored by the head of prominent museum, so that his passing at the age of 92 may be recalled by many. Locally, interest was intensified by the obscurity of the cause of death. The professor has been stricken whilst returning from the Newport board, falling suddenly, as witnesses said, after having been joisted by a nautical-looking negro who had come from one of the queer dark courts on the precipitous hillside which formed a shortcut from the waterfront to the deceased home in William Street. Physicians were unable to find any visible disorder, but conclude after prefixed debate that some obscure lesson of the heart, included by the brisk accent of so steep a hill by so elderly a man, was responsible for the end. At the time, I saw no reason to dissent from this dictum, but latterly I am inclined to wonder, and more than wonder. As my grand-uncle, heir and executor, for he died a childless widower, I was expected to go over his papers with some thoroughness, and for that purpose move his entire set of files and boxes to my quarter in Boston. Much of the materials which I collate will be later published by the American Archaeological Society, but there was one box which I found exceedingly puzzling, and which I felt much averse from showing to other eyes. It had been locked, and I did not find the key till it occurred to me to examine the personal ring which the professor carried always in his pocket. Then, indeed, I succeeded in opening it, but when did I so seemingly only to be confronted by a greater and more closely locked barrier? For what could be the meaning of a queer clay bas-relief and the disjointed jotting, ramblings, and cuttings which I found? Had my uncle, in his later years, become credulous of the most superficial impostures? I resolved to search out the electric sculpture responsible for this apparent disturbance of an old man's peace of mind. The bas-relief was a rough rectangle less than an inch thick and about 5 by 6 inches in area, obviously of modern origin. Its design, however, was far from modern in atmosphere and suggestion, for although the vagaries of Cubism and Futurism are many and wild, they do not often reproduce that cryptic regularity which lurks in the prehistoric writing. And writing of some kind, the bulk of these designs seemed certainly to be, through my memory, despite such familiarity with the papers and collection of my uncle, failed in any way to identify this particular species, or even hint at its remotest affiliation. Above this apparent hieroglyphics was a figure of evidently pictorial intent, though its impressionistic execution forbade a very clear idea of its nature. It seems to be a sort of monster, or symbol, representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fancy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yields simulacious picture of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacle head, surmounted a gross torture and scaly body with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the whole which made it most shockingly frightful. Behind the figure was a vague suggestion of a cryptopian architecture background. The writing accompanying this oddity was, aside from a stack of press cutting, in Professor Angel's most recent hand, and make no pretense to literary style. What seems to be the main document was headed Cthulhu Cult, in characters painstakingly printed to avoid the erroneous reading of a word so unheard of. This manuscript was divided into two sections, the first of which was headed 1925, Dream and Dream Work of H.A. Wilcox, 7 William Street, Providence, Rhode Island, and the second, Narrative of Inspector John R. Legrasse, 121 Benville Street, New Orleans, L.A. at 1908, AAS. Note on same and Professor Webb's account. The other manuscript paper were all brief notes, some of them accounts of the queer dreams of different persons, some of them citations from theosophical books and magazines, notably W. Scott Eliot's Atlantis and the Lost Lemuria, and the rest comments on long-surviving secret societies and hidden cults, which reference to passage in such mythological and anthropological source books as The Fragile Golden Bough and Miss Murray's Witch Cult in Western Europe. The cutting were largely due to altered mental illnesses and outbreak of group folly or mania in the spring of 1925. The first half of the principal manuscript told of very peculiar taste. It appears that on March 1st, 1925, a thin, dark young man of neurotic and excited aspect has called upon Professor Angel, bearing the singular clay vase belief, which was then exceedingly damp and flesh. His card bore the name of Henry Anthony Wilcox, and my uncle has recognized him as the youngest son of an excellent family, slightly known to him, who had lately been studying sculpture at the Rhode Island School of Design and living alone at the Fleur-de-Lis building near that institution. Wilcox was a precocious youth of known genius, but great eccentricity, and had from childhood excited attention through the strange stories and odd dreams he was in the habit of relating. He called himself psychically hypersensitive, but the state folk of the Asian commercial city dismissed him as merely queer. Never mingling much with his kind, he had dropped gradually from social visibility and was now known only to a small group of athletes from other towns. Even the Florence Art Club, anxious to preserve its conservatism, had found him quite hopeless. On the occasion of the visit, ran the professor's manuscript. The sculptor abruptly asked for the benefits of his host's archaeological knowledge in identifying the hieroglyphics on the bas-relief. He spoke in a dreamy, stilted manner, which suggested both an alienated sympathy, and my uncle showed some sharpness in replying, for the conspicuous freshness of the tablet implied kinship with anything but archaeology. Young Wilcox's rejoinder, which impresses my uncle enough to make him recall and record it verbatim, was of a fantastical poetic cast, which must have typified his whole conversation, and which I have since found highly characteristic of him. He said, "It is new indeed, for I have made it last night in a dream of strange cities, and dreams are older than brooding Tyre, and the contemplative Sphinx, or garden-gilded Babylon." It was then that he began that rambling tale which suddenly plays upon a sleeping memory and won the fevered interests of my uncle. There had been a slight earthquake tremor the night before. the most considerable felt in the New England for some years, and Wilcox's imagination has been keenly affected. Upon retiring, he had had unprecedented dreams of great cyclopean cities of Titan blocks and sky-flung monoliths, all dripping with green oaths and sinister with Latin horror. Hieroglyphic had covered the walls and pillars, and from some undetermined point below, and come a voice that was not a voice, a chaotic sensation which only fancy could transmute into a sound, but which he attempted to render by the almost unpronounceable jumble of letters. Cthulhu Hagen. This verbal jumble was the key to the recollection of which excited and disturbed Professor Angel. He questioned the sculpture with scientific minuteness and studied with almost frantic intensity the bas-relief on which the youth has found himself working, chilled and clad only in his night clothes, when waking was stolen bewilderingly over him. My uncle blamed his old age, Wilcox afterwards says, for his slowness in recognizing both hieroglyphics and pictorial design, many of his questions seeming highly cut or placed to his visitor, especially those which tried to connect the latter with strange cults or societies. And Wilcox could not understand the repeated promises of silence which he was offered in exchange for an admission of membership in some widespread mystical or pagan religious body. When Professor Angel became convinced that the sculptor was indeed ignorant of any cult or system of cryptic lore, he besieged his visitor with demands for the future reports of dreams. This bore regular fruit, for after the first interview, the manuscript records daily calls of the young man, during which he related startling fragments of nocturnal imagery, whose burden was always some terrible, cryptopian vista of dark and drooping stone, with a subterranean voice or intelligence shouting monotonously in an enigmatical sense impact, uninscribable save as gibberish. The two sounds more frequently repeated are those rendered by the letter Cthulhu and Relieth. On March 23rd, the manuscript continues. Wilcox failed to appear, and inquiries at his quarters revealed that he has been stricken with an obscure sort of fever and taken to the home of his family in Waterman Street. He had cried out in the night, arousing several other artists in the building, and had manifested since then only alternation of unconsciousness and delirium. My uncle at once telephoned the family, and from that time forward keep close watch of the case, calling often at the Taylor Street office of Dr. Toby, whom he learned to be in charge. The youth's feeble mind, apparently, was dwelling on strange things, and the doctor shuddered now and then as he spoke of them. They include not only a repetition of what he had formerly dreamed, but touched wildly on a gigantic thing miles high, which walked or lumbered about. He at no time fully described this object, but occasional frantic words, as repeated by Dr. Toby, convinces the professor that it must be identical with the nameless monstrosity he had sought to depict in his dream sculpture. Reference to this object, the doctor added, was invariably a prelude to the young man subside into lethargy. His temperature, oddly enough, was not greatly above normal, but his whole condition was otherwise such as to suggest true fever rather than mental disorder. On April 2nd, at about 3 p.m., every trace of Wilcox's madly suddenly ceased. He sat upright in bed, astonished to find himself at home and completely ignorant of what had happened in dream or reality since the night of March 22nd. Pronounced well by his physician, he returned to his quarters in 3 days, but to Professor Andrew he was of no further assistance. All traces of strange dreaming had vanished with his recovery, and my uncle kept no record of his night thoughts after a week of pointless and irrelevant accounts of broadly usual visions. Here, the first part of the manuscript ended, but reference to certain of the scattered notes gave me much material for thought, so much in fact that only the ingrained skepticism then forming my philosophy can account for my continued distrust of the artist. The notes in question were those descriptive of the dreams of various persons covering the same period as that in which young Wilcox had had his strange visitation. My uncle, it seems, had quickly instituted a prodigiously far-flung body of inquiries amongst nearly all the friends whom he could question without impertinence, asking for nightly reports of their dreams and the dates of any notable visions for some time past. The reception of his requests seems to have been vanished, but he must, at the very least, have received more response than any ordinary man could have handled without a secretary. This original correspondence was not preserved, but his note formed a throughout and really significant digest. Average people in society and business, New England's traditional salt of the earth, gave an almost completely negative result through scattered cases of uneasy but formless nocturnal impression appear here and there, always between March 23rd and April 2nd, the period of young Wilcox's delirium. Scientific men were little to be more affected through 4 cases of vague description suggest fugitive glimpse of strange landscape, and in 1 case there is mentioned a dread of something abnormal. It was from the artists and poets that the pertinent answer came, and I know that panic would have broken loose and they been able to compare notes. As it was, lacking their original letters, I have suspected the compiler of having asked leading questions, or of having edited the correspondence in corroborations of what he has latterly resolved to see. That is why I continue to feel that Wilcox, somehow cognizant of the old data which my uncle has possessed, had been imposing on the veteran scientist. These responses from aesthetics throw a disturbing tale. From February 28th to April 2nd, a large proportion of them had dreamed very bizarre things, the intensity of the dreams being immeasurably the stronger during the period of the sculpture delirium. Over a fourth of those who report anything reported scenes and half sounds not unlike those which Wilcox had described, and some of the dreamers confessed acute fear of the gigantic nameless thing visible towards the last. 1 case, of which the note described with emphasis, was very sad. The subject, a widely known architect with leaning towards theosophy and occultism, went violently insane on the date of young Wilcox's seizure, and expired several months later after incessant screaming to be saved from some escaped descendant of hell. Had my uncle referred to this case by name instead of merely by number, I should have attempted some corroboration and personal investigation. But as it was, I succeed in tracing down only a few. all of this, however, bore out the notes in full. I have often wondered if all the objects of the professor's questioning felt as puzzled as did this fraction. It is well that no explanation shall ever reach them. The press cuttings that I have imitated touches on case of panic, mania, and eccentricity during the given period. Professor Angel must have employed a cutting bureau, for the number of extracts were tremendous and the sorts scattered throughout the globe. Here was a nocturnal suicide in London, where a lone sleeper has leaped from a window after a shocking cry. Here, likewise, a rambling letter to the editor of a paper in South America, where a fanatic deduced a dire future from vision he had seen. A dispatch from California describes a Theosophist colony as donning white robes and masses for some glorious fulfillment, which never arrived. With items from India speak guardedly of serious native unrest towards the end of March. Voodoo orgies multiply in Haiti, and African airports report ominous mutterings. American officers in the Philippines find certain drive bothersome at this time, and New York policemen are mobbed by hysterical Levantines on the night of March 22-23. The west of Ireland, too, is full of wild rumors and legendary, and a fantastic painter named Adios Bonnot hangs a blasphemous dream landscape in the Paris spring salon of 1926. And so, numerous are recorded troubles in insane asylums that only a miracle can have stopped the medical fraternity from noting strange parallelism and drawing mystical conclusions. A weird bunch of cuttings, all told, and I can at this stage scarcely envisage the cautious rationalism with which I set them aside. But I was then convinced that young Wilcox had known of the older matters mentioned by the professor.
Okay, that was chapter 1. It was okay. I don't know how other people gonna hear my voice and my accent, but but to be honest, there are some words that I can understand to some extent, but like how to pronounce the word, I have to confess that I do not know. Like I can read well, but some of them read in my mind. I mean, like I can reading and listening and understanding of the chapter, but when pronounce some of the words and some of them, I had some trouble. So I hope some people won't be mad. Okay. Okay. So since we are done with chapter 1, I'll read everyone's comment. Okay. Sorry. Ok thì mặc dù là Eisei đọc thì vẫn hiểu, nhưng mà kiểu có một số từ thì mình kiểu không rõ cái cách đọc ấy, thế nên là có thể là hơi swing một số đoạn một tí, thì xin lỗi những bạn mà thấy mình có đọc sai vài chỗ. Ok, Eisei xin ngủ nước cái đã. Ok, trong lúc đọc comment của mọi người, trước tiên là trên Discord này. Kiểu này sẽ là bơ Eisei. Ý ông là gì? Ý là mình sẽ chỉ muốn nghe Eisei nói ok tôi đang cắn mắt ra nhìn cái kia là áo khoác chuyển động hay là boing boing. Boing boing đó. Boing boing đó. Đi rồi đại đế là point. Đổi nickname thể hiện tên trên stream đi Tuna. Được, chưa được lag. Đợi đấy, Eisei point. Đổi không giống tên gốc. Ông để thêm dấu câu cũng được, miễn sao nó change nick này là được. Tên ngồi đấy tôi có lời khen. Uống nước nào Eisei hơn. Ok, uống nước. Tôi muốn nghe giọng mèo C hú AC. Giảm BGM đọc cho dễ nghe. Giảm BGM. Mọi người có muốn giảm BGM không? Nó chỉ là tiếng campfire thôi, nhưng mà nếu to quá thì để AC giảm xuống một tí. Ok, chắc 13 decibel là được rồi. Thuật gọi hồn chào AC, chào Trung Lê Tuấn Anh. Chưa đập nát đài phiên thiên văn hả AC? Cái đấy là đùa mà. Hello, hi. Nay mới thứ 5, thứ 6. Cái này là trước cho tiếng lửa chạy lớn hơn. Cái này là cái cũ rồi. Sorry. Hello vô trễ. Xin chào Jack Natsuki. Mỗi chapter dài tầm bao lâu? Chắc là tầm khoảng 6 trang mỗi chap à? Chúng ta sẽ đọc bằng tiếng Việt hay tiếng Anh nhỉ? Tiếng Anh. Tầm 10 trang thì phải. Chào buổi tối, đọc bằng tiếng Terra đi AC. Difficult Anh rồi. Hello Miracle, không phải Ngọc trong Ngọc Ngạn chứ. Ý mình là trong tên của mình có chữ Ngọc. Hay cho chứ đâu có hiểu. Ơi mèo sữa, hello Miracle. Mèo ma cả giống qua bếp lửa à? Dân không hiểu tiếng Anh be like. Nhưng nghe chiêu cực. Từ đang kiếm link tiếng Việt lên Wattpad mà tìm bản dịch. Có link tiếng Việt ở trên Wattpad à? AC lâu lắm không dùng Wattpad nên cũng chả để ý. Mình đọc hết rồi nên nghe rồi thu âm lại đêm ngủ thôi. Dành vậy chung IT nhắc đến mình. Sao đây VTuber đang kể chuyện về bạch tuộc nhỉ? Did she learn IELTS? Nãy giờ mới để ý tiếng background là tiếng dàn trứng. Không, nó là tiếng lửa chạy đó. Không phải tiếng dàn trứng đâu, nó là tiếng lửa chạy đấy. I really wanna know. Lâu rồi với vào muộn xin lỗi nhé. Không sao. Hello Teddy. Cthulhu calls maybe then I don't know. Thôi tắt chat tập trung. Pinnacle of the chat figure. Không nghe được gì. Player draw. Umi đã donate. Konbanwa Eisei. Konbanwa Umi. Chào Umi. Mong hôm nay Umi cũng cảm ơn Umi đã super chat cho Eisei. Thank you. Hôm nay đọc Card Cthulhu với mọi người. Muốn đọc cùng thì có link dưới phần mô tả nhé. Đúng rồi, không hiểu tiếng Anh mà nghe chưa phải là lên Google tra vài đường cơ bản. Đặt ra bản Việt dịch. Ở tới trang mấy rồi, đoạn tả ông giáo sư, đoạn bắt đầu kể chuyện làm ăn. Trên bàn tôi đang đọc mô tả lại giấc mơ gặp Cthulhu. Hích đang đi làm với tốc độ này thì bao giờ hết chapter 1 mới đi ngủ nửa thì phải đọc để chill chứ không đọc để phóng ra tạp hóa mua thức ăn phát. Cuối cùng cũng tìm được. Vừa nghe vừa giải tiếng Việt, stream thật thú vị. Hôm qua mong mỏi có ASMR stream, nay có luôn này. Cái này là mình đã hứa trước với cả mọi người từ tuần trước rồi. Nhân Corone, xin chào. Sẵn tiện luyện tiếng Anh để thi luôn. Vừa lên lịch ASMR và có lịch trên Facebook. Đúng rồi, em sẽ có lịch ở trên Facebook, cả Discord và cả Twitter. Bạn có thể theo dõi ở trên đó đó. I'm both aroused and scared now, as we should be. 699. 699 subscribe rồi á. Ủa, nhanh vậy. Tí nữa cụ Lovecraft sẽ sub. You speaking so well. Thank you. Nice. Bắt chi thở nào. Ok, thở. Speaking like IELTS, stay hydrated. Báo cáo chỉ huy, em mém hiểu câu chuyện. Bạn có thể nhờ mọi người gửi link Wattpad bản Việt à? Don't understand it, feel it. Đại khái là hiểu cái tiêu đề rồi. But I understand, I can feel this. Vậy ra chả hiểu gì hết. Don't mind boing. Ngọc đọc có khác. Hẳn là lại Ngọc. Ba đời nhà tôi đọc horror. Tới đây tôi làm fan service. Nghe như tiếng rán trứng. Nó là tiếng lửa đó, kiểu lửa chạy á. Thì mọi người đốt củi và các thứ đúng không? Thì nó là tiếng lửa tí tách đó, chứ không phải tiếng rán trứng đâu. Campfire chứ không phải trứng rán à. Đúng rồi, campfire đó. Nhà tôi bắt đầu mất mạng internet shitty quá, tiếng rán trứng. Đừng có kêu rán trứng nữa.
Giờ nghe hướng đạo sinh say kể chuyện hình như không có bản dịch bản quyền nhỉ, hình như là vậy. June Anthony, your English is so wonderful. Thank you. I'm still a novice in speaking English, but I'm still trying my best. Yeah, thank you. Không có bản quyền, cái cộng đồng Lovecraft lẫn Cosmic Horror Việt Nam bé như lỗ mũi. Well, kiểu các bạn có thể kiểu giới thiệu nhiều cái gì nhỉ? Mọi người biết Dungeons and Dragons rồi đúng không? Thì Dungeons and Dragons là một game tabletop. Mọi người cũng có thể kiểu ngoài tabletop Dungeons and Dragons ra, mọi người cũng có thể giới thiệu cả game tabletop of Cthulhu nữa. Thì qua đó mọi người có thể giới thiệu thêm tới nhiều người việc chơi kiểu các cái game kiểu đó. Và nhỡ đâu đấy, một ngày nào đó chúng ta sẽ có kiểu Call of Cthulhu được chuyển thể sang bản tiếng Việt thì sao? Vậy thì là vậy. Được chưa nhỉ? Chắc là được rồi, con thể thực uống thêm nữa. I hope my Vietnamese is better to understand more. Let me translate some of the comments for you. So reasons, just someone Comrade Weep just comment that the community, the cosmic horror community in Vietnam is so small. You can hardly see it. So I was just saying that similar to Dungeon and Dragon, the tabletop game, Call of Cthulhu also is another tabletop game with horror characteristic as it should be. And so if we try to spread more of the tabletop RPG, Dungeon and Dragon, and Call of Cthulhu to everyone else, we can promote the series and maybe have the Vietnamese version translation of the Call of Cthulhu novel. Yeah. Hi overseas bro, please follow my children. Chat English mode on. We have a Kai Nikki here. Phong ba bão táp không bằng ngữ pháp Việt Nam. Warm welcome. Yeah. Like Monkey Sheep said, welcome to my stream. My name is Eisei. I'm at the moment I am streaming a lot to my fans. They are called the Eisei, and I hope you have a nice day during this stream. Yeah, this stream, like the title said, I will be reading Call of Cthulhu novel. Yeah. Wait, please follow my children. Then you're just gonna ignore my offer like that. Hello Eisei. Hello Mirika. I hope you have a nice day here. Is there Mirika đang xem stream của mình á? Wow, thank you Mirika. Nghe xong câu chuyện cái tối mơ thấy nó thì lại vui. Bạn có thể mơ về EC nữa mà, yên tâm. Ok. Okay. I have drank water, and now let's continue with this chapter 2. Okay. Okay. Let's go. Tôi qua chào thôi. Thank you Mirika. Đâu rồi? À đây. Okay. Mơ về Cthulhu là blessing đấy. Mirika. Bye mọi người, bye EC nha. Ok, bye Mirika nha. Wait, Satan không sao mơ về Cthulhu chứng tỏ bạn đặc biệt. By the way, EC không biết là hiện giờ đang có chat moderator nào không? Okakuro còn ở đây không nhở? Shironeko cô chuối hay là chuối đi, hôm nay bận bên talk show rồi. Saya, nếu bạn ở đấy hãy cho mình thấy cánh tay của bạn. Mơ về Cthulhu là như cha nội kia đấy. Yeah, Will Cox hoặc là cha nội đã chết kìa. Okakoro bay màu rồi. I'm about to go pick up my homie big colors on the field. I'm not over to schedule with other my children. Wait, what? Có mình trên Discord, mình là Saya. Giờ mới để ý hôm nay không có hội cầm cờ lên nhỉ? Chắc trên YouTube là Nguyễn Cường ạ. Ok. Add moderator, ok. Tại vì Eisei không chắc là kiểu có mod nào đang on không. Okakoro thì có thể là kiểu đang bận chưa về ấy. Tại vì mấy ngày hôm nay bạn ý đang bận, lẫn cả Eisei thường thấy là bạn ý về khá là muộn. Thế nên Saya Eisei mới cho Saya quyền moderator rồi đó. Saya tưởng làm cái account YouTube mới rồi, chào bạn cả nhà. Ok. Vậy chúng ta tiếp tục thôi nhỉ. Reverb. Okay, now we come to the second chapter of the story. It's already how long have we been streaming again? Wait, it's 47 minutes. Yeah, okay, nearly 1 hour, but that's okay. Okay, let's continue, shall we? Might I say so? Okay. Mic test. Okay. Is the sound okay? Should I lower the volume of the campfire? Có lẽ không thấy là gì, không anh lạm quyền rồi, không sợ gì hết. Lạm quyền time 47 minutes, 48. Okay. Sora chắc cũng đang bận hay là thôi vậy. Okay. The second chapter. The Tale of Inspector Legras. Chapter 2. The older matters which had made the sculptured dreams and bas-relief so significant to my uncle formed the subject of the second half of his long manuscript. Once before, it appears, Professor Angel had seen the hellish outline of the nameless monstrosity, puzzled over the unknown hieroglyphics, and heard the ominous syllables, which can be rendered only as Cthulhu, and all this in so stirring and horrible a connection that it is small wonder he pursued young Wilcox with queries and demands for data. This earlier experience had come in 1908, 17 years before, when the American Archaeological Society held its annual meeting in St. Louis. Professor Angel, as befitted one of his authority and attainments, had a prominent part in all the deliberations, and was one of the first to be approached by the several outsiders who took advantage of the convocation to offer questions for correct answering and problems of expert solutions. The chief of these outsiders, and in a short time the focus of interest for the entire meeting, was a commonplace-looking middle-aged man who had traveled all the way from New Orleans for certain special information, unobtainable from any local source. His name was John Raymond Legras, and he was by profession an inspector of police. With him he bore the subject of his visit, a gross-to-cure, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statue whose origin he was at a loss to determine. It must not be fancied that Inspector Legras had the least interested in archaeology.
On the contrary, his wish for the enlightenment was prompted by purely professional considerations. The statue, idol, fetish, or whatever it was, had been captured some months before in the wooden swamp south of New Orleans during a raid on a supposed voodoo meeting, and so singular and hideous were the rites connected with it, and the police could not but realize that they had stumbled on a dark cult totally unknown to them, and infinitely more diabolic than ever the blackest of the African voodoo circles. Of its origin, apart from the erratic and unbelievable tales extorted from the captured members, absolutely nothing was to be discovered. Hence, the anxiety of the police for any antiquarian lore which might help them to place the frightful symbol, and through it track down the cult to its fountainhead. Inspector Legras was scantily prepared for the sensation which his offering created. One sight of the thing had been enough to throw the assembled men of science into a state of tense excitement, and they lost no time in crowding around him to gaze at the diminutive figure, whose utter strangeness and an air of genuity, abysmal antiquity hint so potently at unopened and archaic vistas. No recognized school of sculpture had animated this terrible object, yet centuries and even thousands of years seemed recorded in its dim and greenish surface of unplaceable stone. The figure, which was finally passed slowly from man to man for close and careful study, was between 7 and 8 inches in height, and of exquisitely artistic workmanship. It represents a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head, whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on its hind and 4 feet, and long, narrow wings behind. This thing, which seems instinct with a fearsome and unnatural malignancy, was of a somewhat bloated corpulence, and squatted evilly on a rectangular block or pedestal covered with undecipherable characters. The tips of the wings touched the back edge of the block. The seat occupied the center, which the long, curved claw of the double-up, crouching hind legs gripped the front edge and extended a quarter of the way down towards the bottom of the pedestal. The stellar-loped head was bent forward so that the end of the facial feelers brushes the back of huge forepaws, which clasped the croucher's elevated knees. The aspect of the whole was abnormally lifelike, and the more subtle fearful, because its source was so totally unknown. Its vast, awesome, and incalculable age was unmistakable, yet not one link did it share with any known type of art belonging to a civilization's youth, or indeed to any other time. Totally separate and apart, its very material was a mystery, for the soapy, greenish black stone, with its golden or iridescent flecks and striations, resembled nothing familiar to geology or mineralogy. The characters along the base were equally baffling, and no member present, despite a representation of half the world's expert learning in this field, could form the least notion of even their remotest linguistic kinship. They, like the subject and material, belong to a something horribly remote and distinct from mankind as we know it, something frightfully suggestive of all enveloped circles of life in which our world and our conception have no parts. And yet, as the members severally shook their heads and confessed its defeat as the inspector's problems, there was one man in that gathering who suspected a touch of bizarre familiarity in the monstrous shape and writings, and who presently told with some differences of the odd trifle he knew. This person was the late William Charming Webb, professor of anthropology in Princeton University and an explorer of no slight note. Professor Webb has been engaged 48 years before in a tour of Greenland and Iceland in search of some runic inscriptions which he failed to unearth, and which, high up on the West Greenland coast, had encountered a singular tribe or cult of degenerate Esquimaux, whose religion, a curious form of devil worship, chilled him with its deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. It was a fate of which other Esquimaux knew little, and which they mentioned only with subtles, saying that it had come down from horribly ancient eons before ever the world was made. Besides nameless rites and human sacrifice, there were certain queer hereditary rituals addressed to a supreme elder evil, or Tunasux, and of this Professor Webb had taken a careful phonetic copy from an aged andragogue or wizard priest, expressing the sound in Roman letters as best he knew how. But just now, of prime significance was the fetish which this cult had cherished, and around which they danced when the aurora lived high over the ice cliffs. It was, the professor stated, a very crude bas-relief of stone, comprising a hideous picture and some cryptic writing, and so far as he could tell, it was a rough parallel in all essential features of the bestial thing now lying before the meeting. This data, received with suspense and astonishment by the assembled members, proved doubly exciting to Inspector Legras, and he began at once to ply his informant with questions. Having noted and copied an oral ritual among the swarm cult worshippers his man has arrested, he besought the professor to remember as best he might the syllables taken down amongst the diabolus Esquimaux. There then followed an exhaustive comparison of details, and a moment of really awed silence when both detective and scientist agreed on the virtual identity of the face common to whose hellish rituals so many worlds of distance apart. What in substance both the Esquimaux wizard and the Louisiana swarm priestess had changed to their kindred idols was something very like this, the word divisions being guesses as at from traditional breaks in the phrase ad chanted aloud. Persui mulok nok Cthulhu layak wilok nok fisan. Legras had one point in advance of Professor Webb, for several among his mongrel prisoners had repeated to him what older celebrate had told them the words means. This text was given, ran something like this: in his house at riot that Cthulhu waits, dreaming. And now, in response to a general and urgent demand, Inspector Legras related
as fully as possible his experience with the swarm worshippers, telling a story to which I could see my uncle attach profound significance. It savors of the wildest dream of myth makers and theosophists, and disclose an astonishing degree of cosmic imagination among such half-castes and pariahs as might be least expected to possess it. On November 1st, 1907, there had come to the New Orleans police a frantic summons from the swamp and lagoon country to the south. The squatters there, mostly primitive but good-natured descendants of Lafitte's men, were in the grip of stark terror from an unknown thing which had stolen upon them in the night. It was voodoo, apparently, but voodoo of a more terrible sort than they had ever known, and some of their women and children had disappeared since the mother-loaden tom-tom had begun its incessant beating far within the black haunted woods where no dweller ventures. There were insane shouts and harrowing screams, soul-chilling chants, and dancing devil's flames, and the frightened messenger added, the people could stand it no more. So, in a body of 20 police, filling 2 carriages and an automobile, had set out in the late afternoon with the shivering squatters as a guide. At the end of the passable road they alighted, and for miles splashes on its silence through the terrible cryptous woods where days never came. Ugly roots and malignant hanging notes of Spanish moss beset them, and now and then a pile of dank stones or fragment of a rotting wall intensified by its hints of morbid habitation, a depression which every malformed tree and every fungus islet combined to create. At length, the squatter settlements, a miserable huddle of huts, hove in sight, and hysterical dwellers ran out to cluster around the group of bobbling lanterns. The muffled beat of tom-toms was now faintly audible far, far ahead, and a cuddling shrek came at infrequent intervals when the wind shifted. A reddish glare, too, seems to be filtered through the pale undergrowth beyond the endless avenues of forest night. Reluctant even to be left alone again, each one of the crowded splatters refused, point-blank, to advance another inch towards the scene of unholy worship. So Inspector Leglass and his 19 colleagues plumped on unguided into the black arcades of horror that none of them had ever trod before. The region now entered by the police was one of traditionally evil rapture, sustainably unknown and untraversed by white men. There were legends of a hidden lake and glimpses by mortal sight in which dwelt a huge, formless white polypus thing with luminous eyes, and squatters which whispered that battered-winged devils flew out of caverns in inner earth to worship it at midnight. They said it had been there before the Iberville, before La Salle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they knew enough to keep away. The present voodoo orgy was, indeed, on the merest fringe of this abhorred area, but that location was bad enough. Hence, perhaps the very place of the worship had terrified the squatters more than the shocking sounds and incidents. Only poetry or madness could do justice to the noises heard by Legras' men as they ploughed on through the black morass toward the red glare, and muffled tom-toms. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts, and it's terrible to hear the one when the source should yell the other. Animal fury and orgiastic license here whipped themselves to demoniac heights by howls and squawking ecstasies that tore and reverberated through nose-nighted woods like pestilential tempests from the gulfs of hell. Now and then the less organized ululation would cease, and from what seems a well-drilled chorus of hoarse voice would rise in a sing-song chant that hideous phrases or ritual. Pthoi Malok, Cthulhu Lariat Beloved Nak Fathan. Then the man, having reached the spot where the trees were thinner, came suddenly in sight of the spectacle itself. Four of them reeled, one fainted, and two were shaking into a frantic cry, which the mad cacophony of the orgy fortunately deadened. The glass dashes swam water on the face of the fainting man, and all stood trembling and nearly hypnotized with horror. In the natural glade of the swamp stood a glassy island, or perhaps an arc extent, clear of trees and tolerably dry. On this now lived and twisted a more indescribable horde of human abnormality than any but a slime or an Angarola could paint. Void of clothing, these hybrid spawn were braiding, billowing, and writhing about a monstrous, ring-shaped bonfire, in the center of which, revealed by occasional rifts in the curtain of flames, stood a great granite monolith some 8 feet in height, on top of which, incorrodious in its diminutiveness, rested the nauseous carven statue. From a wide circle of stand scaffold set up at regular intervals with the flame-grid monolith as a central hung, head downward, the oddly marred bodies of the helpless squatters who had disappeared. It was inside this circle that the ring of worshippers jumped and roared, the general direction of the mass motion being from left to right, in endless bacchanal between the ring of bodies and the ring of fire. It may have been only imagination, and it may have been only echoes, which indulged one of the men, an excitable Sparnitard, to fancy he heard antiphonal response to the ritual from some far and unilluminated spot deeper within the wood of ancient legendary and horror. This man, Joseph D. Galvez, I later met and questioned, and he proved distractingly imaginative. He indeed went so far as to hint of the faint beating of great wings, and of a glimpse of shining eyes, and a mountainous white bulk beyond the remotest trees. But I suppose he had been hearing too much native superstition. Actually, the horrified pause of the man was of comparatively brief duration. Duty came first, and although there must have been nearly 100 mongrel celebrants in the throng, the police relied on their firearms and plunged determinedly into the nauseous rout. For 5 minutes, the resultant din and chaos were beyond description. Wild blows were struck, shots were fired, and escapes were made, but in the end, Legras was able to count some 47 sullen prisoners, whom he forced to dress in hassle and fall into line between 2 rows of policemen. 5 of the worshippers lay dead, and 2 severely wounded ones were carried away on improvised stretchers by their fellow prisoners. The image of the monolith, of course, was carefully removed and carried back by Legras. Examined at the headquarters after a trip of intense strain and weariness, the prisoners are proved to be men of a very low, mixed-blooded, and mentally aberrant type. Most were seamen, and a sprinkling of Negroes and mulattoes, largely West Indians and Berber Portuguese from the Cape Verde Islands, gave a coloring of voodooism to the heterogeneous cult. But before many questions were asked, it became manifest that something far deeper and older than Negro fetishism was involved. Degraded and ignorant as they were, the creatures held with surprisingly consistency to the central idea of the loathsome faith. They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea. But the dead bodies had told their secrets in dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant, wasted, and dark places all over the world, until the time when the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Ryleth, under the waters, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Someday he would call, when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him. Meanwhile, no more must be told. There was a secret which even torture could not extract. Mankind was not absolutely alone among the conscious things of earth, for Shapes came out of the dark to visit the fateful veil. But they were not the great old ones. No man has ever seen the old ones. The carven idol was great Cthulhu, but none might say whether or not the others were precisely like him. No one could read the old writing now, but things were told by word of mouth. The chanted ritual was not the secret. It was never spoken aloud, only whispers. The chain meant only this: in his house at Riot, that Cthulhu waits, dreaming. Only two of the prisoners were found sane enough to be hanged, and the rest were committed to various institutions. All denied a part in the ritual murders, and averted that the killing had been done by black-winged ones, which had come to them from their immemorable meeting place in the haunted wood. But of those mysterious allies, no coherent account could never be gained. What the police did extract came mainly from the emergently aged mestizo named Castro, who claimed to have sailed to strange ports and talked with undying leaders of the cult in the mountain of China. Old Castro remembered bits of hideous legends that paled the speculation of theosophists and made man and the world seem reasons and transition. Indeed, there had been eons when other things ruled on the earth, and they had had great cities. Remains of them, he said, the deadly Chinaman had told him, was still to be found at Cyclopean stones on Iceland in the Pacific. They all died vast epochs of time before man came, but there were arts which could revive them when the stars had come round again to the right position in the cycle of eternity. They had indeed come themselves from the star and brought their image with them. These great old ones, Castro continued, were not composed altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not the star-fashioned image prove it? But what shape was not made of matter? when the stars were right, they could plunge from world to world through the sky. But when the stars were wrong, they could not live. But although they no longer live, they would never really die. They all lay in stone, houses in the great city of Freylight, preserved by the spell of mighty Cthulhu, for a glorious resurrection when the stars and the earth might once more be ready for them. But at that time, some force from outside must serve to liberate their bodies. The spell that preserved them intact likewise prevented them from making an initial move, and they could only lie awake in the dark and think with and counted millions of years rolled by. They knew all that was occurring in the universe, for the dark mode of speech was transmitted thought. Even now, they talk in their tombs. When, after infinite of chaos, the first man came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by mouthing their dreams. Not only thus could their language reach the fleshly minds of mammals. Then, whispered Castro, those first men formed the cult around small idols which the Great One shewed them. Idols brought in dim eras of the dark stars. That cult would never die till the stars came right again, and the secret priest would take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule of earth. The time would be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the great old ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside, and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated old one would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Meanwhile, the cult, by appropriate rites, would keep alive the memory of those ancient ways and shadow forth the prophecy of their return. In the elder time, chosen men have talked with the entombed old ones in dreams, but then something happened. The great stone city Riot, with its monolith and spectators, have sunk beneath the wave, and the deep waters, full of the one primal mystery, through which not even thought can pass, had cut up the spectral intercourse. But memory never died, and the high priest said that the city would rise again when the stars were right. Then came off the earth the black spirit of earth, mouldery and shadowy, and full of dim rumors picked up in the cavern beneath forgotten sea bottoms. But of them old Castro dared not speak much. He cut himself off hurriedly, and no amount of persuasion or subtlety could elicit more in this direction. The sigh of the old ones, too, his curiosity declined to mention. Of the cult, he said that he thought the center lay amid the pathless desert of Arabia, where inland the city of pillars, dreams hidden and untouched. It was not allied to the European witch cult and was virtually unknown beyond its members. No book had ever really hinted of it. Through the deathless Chinaman said that there were double meanings of the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abu Arafat, which the initiate might read as they choose, especially the much discussed couplet. That is not that which can eternal lie, and with straying eons even dead may die. Leglas, deeply impressed and not a little bewitched, had inquired in vain concerning the historic affiliation of the cult. Castro apparently had told the truth when he said that it was wholly secret. The authorities at Tulane University could shed no light upon either cult or image, and now the detective had come to the highest authorities of the country and meet with no more than the Green Lantern of Professor Webb. the feverish interest aroused at the meeting by Legras' tale, corroborated as it was by the statute, is echoed in the subsequent correspondence of those who attended, although scant mention occurs in the formal publication of the society. Caution is the first care of those accustomed to face occasional charlatanry and imposture. Legras for some time lent the image to Professor Webb, but at the later date it was returned to him and remains in his possession, where I viewed it not long ago. It is truly a terrible thing, and unmistakably akin to a dream sculpture of young Wilcox. That my uncle was excited by the tale of the sculpture I did not wonder, for what thoughts must arise upon hearing, after knowledge of what Legras had learned of the cult, of a sensitive young man who had dreamed not only the figure and extract hieroglyphics of the swan found image and the Greenland devil tablets, but had come in his dreams upon at least 3 of the precise words of the formula uttered alike by the Esquimaux Diabolus and Mongrel Louisianus. Professor Angel instantly started on an investigation of the utmost thoroughness was immensely natural. To privately, I suspected young Wilcox of having heard of the cult in some indirect way, and of having invented a series of dreams to heighten and continue the mystery as my uncle expands. The dream narratives and cuttings collected by the professors were, of course, strong corroborations, but the rationalism of my mind and the extravagance of the whole subject led me to adopt what I thought the most sensible conclusion. So, after thoroughly studying the manuscript again and collating the theosophical and anthropological notes with the cult narratives of Legras, I made a trip to Providence to see the sculpture and give him the rebuke I thought proper for so boldly imposing upon a learned and aged man. Wilcox still lived alone in the Fleur-de-Lis building in Thomas Street, a hideous Victorian imitation of 17th century Breton architecture which flaunts its stuccoed front amidst the lovely colonial house on the ancient hill, and under the very shadow of the finest Georgian stable in America. I found him at work in his room, and at once coincidence from the specimens scattered about that his genius is indeed profound and authentic. He will, I believe, sometime be heard from as one of the great descendants, for he has crystallized in clay and will one day mirror in marble those nightmares and fantasies which Arthur Machen evolves in prose, and Clark Ashton Smith makes visible in verse and in painting. Dark, frail, and somewhat unkempt in aspect, he turned languidly at my knock and asked me my business without rising. When I told him who I was, he displayed some interest, for my uncle had excited his curiosity in probing his strange dreams, yet had never explained the reason for the study. I did not enlarge his knowledge in this regard, but sought with some subtlety to draw him out. In a short time, I became convinced of his absolute sincerity, for he spoke of the dreams in a manner none could mistake. They and their subconscious residuum had influenced his art profoundly, and he showed me a morbid statue whose contours almost made me shake with the potency of its black suggestion. He could not recall having seen the original of this thing except in his own dream bas-relief, but the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hand. It was no doubt the giant shape he had raved in his delirium, that he really knew nothing of the hidden cult, save from what my uncle relented catechism had let fall.
he soon made clear, and again I strove to think of some way in which he could possibly have received the weird impression. He talked of his dreams in a strangely poetic fashion, making me see with terrible vividness the dark cyclopean city of slimy green stone, whose geometry, he oddly said, was all wrong, and here, with frightened expectancy, the ceaseless half-mental calling from underground, Cthulhu flak, Cthulhu flak. Those words had formed part of that dread ritual which told of dead Cthulhu dreams Virgil in his stone vault in Riyadh, and I felt deeply moved despite my rational belief. Wilcox, I was sure, had heard of the cult in some casual way, and had soon forgotten it amidst the mass of its equality weird reading and imagining. Later, by virtue of its sheer impressiveness, it had found subconscious expression in dreams, in the blast relief, and in the terrible statue I now beheld, so that his imposture upon my uncle has been a very innocent one. The youth was of a type as one slightly affected and slightly ill-mannered, which I could never like, but I was willing enough now to admit both his genius and his honesty. I took leave of him amicably and wished him all the succeed his talent promises. The matter of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and that time I had visions of personal fame from researches into its origins and connections. I visited New Orleans, talked with Leglass and others of that old-time raiding party, saw the frightful image, and even questioned such of the mongrel prisoners as still survived. Old Castro, unfortunately, had been dead for some years. What now I heard, so graphically at first hand, for it was really no more than a detailed confirmation of what my uncle had written, excited me afresh, for I felt sure that I was on the track of a very real, very secret, and very ancient religion, whose discovery would make me an anthropologist of note. My attitude was still one of those absolute materialism, and I wish it still were, as I discount with almost inexplicable perversity the coincidence of the dream notes and odd cutting collected by Professor Angel. One thing I began to suspect, and which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from natural. He fell from a narrow hill street leaning up from an ancient waterfront, swarming with foreign mongrels, after a careless push from a Negro sailor. I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult member in Louisiana, and would not be surprised to learn of secret methods and rites and beliefs. Leglass and his men, it is true, had been left alone, but in Norway a certain seaman who saw things is dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle, after encountering the sculptured data, have come to Sinister's ears? I think Professor Angel died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remain to be seen, as I have learned too much now.
Yeah. Chapter 2 is done. How was it? How was it? Okay, I'm gonna read the comment. Okay, Discord first. Comrade. Tôi chắc xem tốn bao lâu để ông đấy notice chỗ chat Discord tôi. Tốt nhất hãy uống ngay một ly nước. Ok. Ok. Biết nhiều quá dễ tạch lắm. Đúng rồi. Biết nhiều quá dễ tạch lắm. Ok. Từ chỗ nào nhở? Second chapter, let's go. Ok, thế là được rồi. The echo is messing with the voice. Không ai lạm quyền cả, nghe tiếp nào mọi người. Your backpack, speak up, I can't hear from the back of the class. How to cắn lưỡi. Which page is she reading? I lost it. Nine mate, what is she reading? May mà lưỡi AC điêu luyện chứ không lại đau đấy. Now 10, sao tự nhiên lại thấy tên mình ý nhỉ? Đoạn câu chú của Cthulhu cắn lưỡi là phải. Không có cắn lưỡi lắm đâu nhỉ? Lưỡi mình nói Cthulhu liar và laugh tongue. AC cố tình đọc như thế để nghe cho nó gọi thế nào nhỉ? Authentic hơn à? Call Cthulhu, ok, để call Cthulhu cult. Thì lạm quyền giả đến rồi. Đường tìm team Clay ấy mà mình lạm quyền trước đây. Hello Sora. Wholesome Peace. Liều lưỡi part 2 chat được nhé. Tôi cần lưỡi part 2 chat Discord và phần stream chat là lên stream nhé. Jack Natsuki lost page again. Felt khóc trung thành quá, cơ bản là mấy đứa loạn trí rồi. 700 rồi kìa. 700 rồi à? Khoan, từ từ, chặt tơ. Wow, 701 rồi. Thank you mọi người. 700. Chúng ta đã có 700 AC rồi. Yeah, hoan hô. Ok. How you slap chat? Cụ Lovecraft đã đưa sắp lên 700. Có khi. Yes, cảm giác bất lực câu bờ lên quá ages. Still listen. Party. Biết nhiều quá sẽ tạch lắm. Đúng rồi. Có câu gì nhỉ? Curiosity killed the cat. Có câu đó mà. Eisei uống nước một phát mà thấy bị bão gai. Hẳn là thế. Ignorance is bliss. Yes. Cái gì nhỉ? Từ từ. Sleep. Đây rồi. Mọi người có biết ở trong cái gì nhỉ? 1984 1984 ấy, nó có một cái câu War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Mọi người có nhớ cái đấy không? Tự dưng đọc cái câu ignorance is bliss của Monkey Chip, tự dưng AC nhớ đến cái đấy. Stay hydrated. Ok. Lẽ tôi điêu luyện lắm về eiseitenmondai. Cthulhu cuốn vậy thì Darkness Dungeon còn cuốn cỡ nào nữa? Đoạn AC cho biết người biết thế nào là đủ giới hạn mới là giàu, người biết mình không biết mới là người biết. Thế nên đừng tọc mấy giáo của xưa như các bạn. Đúng rồi, mọi người hãy cẩn thận nhá. Chúng ta không biết được như thế nào đâu. Mà làm sao cấp được The Odd One nhờ? Mắt tuy đọc nhưng não cứ vào tập trung nghe giọng AC đi. Chat tu lại chả hiểu gì. Nãy có câu này mình quên hỏi, đó là AC đã bao giờ ngại ngùng khi chat voice trên Discord chưa? Chúng mình vừa rồi rất ngại khi vào kênh voice của Hololive in Discord. Nói sao nhỉ? Mami, mình kiểu mình không ngại ngùng thì có thể là mấy hôm đầu thôi, chứ còn đâu mấy hôm sau là bình thường hết đấy mà. Nữa hả quý, quen rồi thì voice chat hàng ngày. Yep. Dù tôi chưa thử bao giờ, Dragon với cả Dreamland cũng cuốn lắm. Người thường nhìn vào The Odd One sẽ chết. Gì 1984 sao đắt thế? Cái chuyện này đâu, cái chuyện đó đâu có dark lắm đâu. Nó vẫn là một trong những cái cuốn về kiểu dystopian society AC thích từ xưa đến giờ mà. Phát điên thôi. I think I go to sleep now. Ok, bye bye Jack Natsuki. Cho tôi 5 phút refill nước. Gì mình không dừng đấy các bạn. Ok, khoan từ từ, AC cũng uống hết nước rồi. Mọi người đợi AC chắc là 5 phút ạ. Mọi người đợi AC 5 phút. AC cũng đi lấy thêm nước nhá. Chỉ một tí thôi. Thế nhá. AC chạy đi lấy thêm nước chứ không hết nước rồi. Được chưa nhỉ? Đâu nhỉ? Nó là chỗ này nhỉ? Tắt để tí nhá. I'll be right back. Just wait a bit. Okay, I am back. Okay, not this. Okay. Hello, Eisei mới đi lấy thêm nước. Mọi người đã chuẩn bị tiếp nước và đồ ăn vặt hay là các thứ chưa? Đổi livestream. Ok. Hú bài Eisei đi ngủ đây mà sập nguồn rồi. Ok, Lali desu. Ngủ ngon nha. Gì thể loại dystopian default nó sẽ dark mà. Nhưng mà nói sao nhỉ, Monkey Jeep Eisei thích đọc dystopian novel tại vì kiểu nó nói về một cái dark future ấy, và qua đấy Eisei luôn luôn nghĩ là xã hội của mình phải làm như thế nào để có thể tránh được những cái trường hợp kiểu đó. Đó, thì đấy là suy nghĩ của mình. Gì thể loại bye Eisei. Ok, em rồi ngủ thôi anh em. Hả? Khoan từ từ, chờ em mà. Khoan từ từ, sao mọi người đi hết rồi? Em rồi ngủ thôi anh em. Unstreamed. Em rồi nhớ Terry ngủ đi rồi vậy. Là nhân quả đấy. Hả? Và anh em, tôi sẽ lại stream đây. Sự làm Cherry ạ. Gì tôi có việc sẽ lại stream vui vẻ. Thông cảm chứ. Ok bạn ơi, quay lại archive đi. Mà con người ngủ tuyệt gần 2 tiếng lận. Ai à, đọc chơi chi đã 1 tiếng rưỡi rồi nè. Gần 2 tiếng rồi mọi người. Đọc chuyện cho mọi người, thời gian trôi nhanh quá. Eisei cũng không để ý luôn. Bị nguyền rủa bởi tri thức. Ai yêu, chọc mấy thứ không nên chọc, tri thức đáng nguyên rồi, tôi không đến muộn quá chứ các bro. Hello Thái Nguyễn. Hôm nay Eisei đọc Cthulhu tiểu thuyết bằng tiếng Anh với cả mọi người. Thật ra bây giờ mới đến chat, hình như bây giờ chat 3 rồi đúng không? Chat 3 đúng không nhỉ? Vừa đến đây đâu ấy. Dạ, chat 3. Không bao giờ là quá muộn quá. Chắc không bao giờ là quá muộn đâu. Không end đâu. Tránh thì đừng thờ mấy con bệnh tuổi. Các AC sâu không cần cả tháng tư vẫn trốn nhau như thường. Trốn nhau. Ok. Uống nước cái nào. mic test, A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P Q R S T U V W X Y and Z. Now I know my ABC. Tell me what you think of me. Ok. Chơi gần 2 tiếng cho bà. Stream try hard, ngủ gì ai biết đâu, buồn quá. Ok, cô đôi you try. Cảm ơn Easy đã đọc nhé. Chưa đọc xong đâu, nhưng mà trời gần 2 tiếng chắc bà. Mai sáng nghỉ nhiều lâu thôi. Ai bảo em đó, em xem vào nước. Buồn ngủ mà không muốn quay lại archive sao không có thời gian. Leo Kobayashi có thể kiểu bật ở trên điện thoại xong kiểu để thế. Thì Eisei cũng sẽ tại vì lần này Eisei cũng chỉ gần như là kiểu hát du cho mọi người thôi mà. Đọc truyện hát du thì bạn có thể dùng như thế làm kiểu đọc truyện để dễ ngủ hơn ấy. À da, vẫn khát nước đây ta. Okay. We continue. Không biết sau chat vừa rồi mọi người thấy như thế nào. Chúng ta bắt đầu đi sâu vào trong các tri thức của The Great Old One rồi. Chúng ta bắt đầu lấn quá sâu vào trong câu chuyện này rồi. Chúng ta bắt đầu lấn sân vào trong phần đất của các vị thần cổ xưa rồi. Không biết sanity của mọi người như thế nào, chứ Eisei đọc nãy giờ đúng kiểu tuyệt vời quá. Thật sự luôn á. But yeah, let's us continue, shall we? Okay, what else? Càng coi càng thấy mấy cha đó chơi ngu. Buồn ngủ. Tôi hết dỗi rồi mà đuổi tôi à? Không, có đuổi đâu nè. Một cái archive mất 5 ngày để tiêu hóa là bình thường. Mày đã biết quá nhiều đến mức rồi đấy. San check mọi người. Vibe check, san check. Cái này là một trong những cái mà Eisei mỗi khi kiểu thần tượng của Eisei kiểu gọi sao nhỉ, cũng san check kiểu chat ấy thì cô ấy cũng hay làm trò này. Ví dụ kiểu ok, chúng ta san check nhá. Wow. How is your sanity? How is your sanity going?
お疲れ。今日の配信はね、ASMR reading The Call of Cthulhu.
Oh boy. Saya mình chỉ thấy hay thôi. Lord AJ là ngôi sao nên không bị Outer God ảnh hưởng mà. In Our Love Club nhiều cái kinh dị sẽ kết thúc sớm nếu dàn character có thêm một điểm IQ mà. Ina là Love Club. Outer God là thứ tạo nên thế giới. Outer God ngủ mà tạo nên thế giới. Nó thức là minh tạch. AJ chủ multiverse nên không. AJ chỉ là có cosmic power thôi chứ kiểu mấy cái này kiểu nhiều khi kiểu mình biết là kiểu curiosity kill the cat ấy, nhưng mà mình vẫn kiểu lấn thân vào, thế nên shoganai desu ne. Yeah. Sanity over trên 10, 1+1 soup miso. Nghe mà buồn ngủ quá, đồ ngon vậy tí sao mình vẫn là ok. Vậy thì các bạn trong lúc đọc thì mọi người có thể order kiểu takoyaki hay là cái gì đấy. Easy nghĩ giờ này ở một số quán ở trên Foodie và kiểu Foodie Now với cả Bemin Bemin hình như vẫn còn mấy quán takoyaki mà mọi người có thể order về xong sân đấy vừa nhóc nhép xong vừa nghe đọc tiếp.
Laser beam. Eisei no beam. Kashoo.
Cả vũ trụ là giấc mơ của Azeroth, dàn vô tận ENDCARD phải thôi kéo mệt nghỉ đi. Ok. Eisei vs ENDCARD, tôi đang ở trong bệnh viện vỗ béo Eisei. Ủa? Sao lại vỗ béo tôi? What? Sao lại vỗ béo? Thôi. Luyện chiêu vẽ bằng chuột. Ok. Vậy thì chúng ta tiếp thôi nhá. Trên Discord chưa có thêm cái gì mới. Vậy thì ok. Kobayashi không ăn đồ ăn ngoài được. Oh no. Thế thì cẩn thận nhá. Oh no, ACP đang EC hóa tôi. Leo vẫn viện là khổ thế. Leo Kobayashi. EC thì có nghe một vài người bạn của EC là kiểu họ cũng là kiểu ca trực ở bệnh viện thì họ có bảo là ca trực thường rất là muộn, thì EC mong Leo có thể khi nào xong có thể về sớm để có thể nghỉ ngơi đầy đủ, sức khỏe cẩn thận, tại vì mai cuối tuần rồi mà, đúng không? Lúc đấy thì chơi cho thật vui, xả ra thật đã. Ok. Vậy chúng ta tiếp tục nhá. Wait, more water. Should be fine. Yeah. Thao vào nhau bằng AC beam, tôi nằm viện chứ không trực. Oh, wait. Leo Kobayashi, bạn đi làm. Are you okay? Lâu từ bệnh nhân thành bác sĩ vậy nằm thành trực hồi nào vậy? Kiểu Leo cô tự dưng bạn nói là kiểu đang ở trong bệnh viện, không ăn đồ ăn ngoài được, thế nên EC tưởng là kiểu bạn đang trực trong bệnh viện, xong rồi kiểu không được phép ăn ấy. Ok. Vậy thì mong bạn sớm hồi phục sức khỏe nè. Lại đây. Chứ. Ok. Hôn một cái vào trán cho bạn mau khỏi. Còn các EC số khác thì cũng ra đây, EC sẽ chứ cho một cái để cho các bạn sẽ tràn đầy năng lượng để có thể quẩy thật là nhiệt vào cuối tuần. Ok. Thế nhá. Chapter 3. The Madness of the Sea. If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it will be a total effacing of the result of the mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper. It was nothing on which I would naturally have stumbled in the course of my daily round, for it was an old number of an Australian journal, the Sydney Bulletin for April 18, 1925. It had escaped even the Cutling Bureau, which had at the time of its issuance been avidly collecting materials for my uncle's research. I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angel called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and a mineralogist of note, examining one day the reverse specimen roughly set on the storage shelf in a rear room of the museum. My eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stone. It was the Sydney Bulletin I have mentioned, for my friend had wide affiliation in all conceivable foreign parts, and the picture was half-tone cut of a hideous stone image, almost identical with that which Legras had found in the swamp. Eagerly clearing the sheet of its precious contents, I scanned the item in detail, and was disappointed to find of only moderate length. What it suggested, however, was of portentous significance to my flagging quest, and I carefully tore it out for immediate action. It read as follows: Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilance arrived with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard tell of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescue seamen refuse particulars of strange experience. Art idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow. The Morrison Cove frightened Vigilant, bound from Valparaiso, arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbour, having in tow the battered and disabled but heavily armed steam yacht Alert of Dunedin NZ, which was sighted April 12 in sign latitude 34 degree 21 minute longitude 150 and 52 degree 17 minutes. Như cái đấy đâu là minute. Yeah. With one living and one dead man aboard, the Vigilant left Valparaiso March 25 and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and monster waves. On April 12, the derelict was sighted and, though apparently deserted, was found upon boarding to contain one survivor in a half-delirious condition and one man who was evidently been dead for more than a week. The living man was clutching a horrible stone idol of unknown origin, about a foot in height, regarding whose nature authorities at Sydney University, the Royal Society, and the Museum in College Street all profess complete bafflement, and which the survivor says he found in the cabin of the yacht in a small carved shrine of common pattern. This man, after recovering his sense, told an exceedingly strange stories of piracy and slaughter. He is Gustav Johansen, a Norwegian of some intelligence, and had been second mate of the two-master schooner Emma of Orange Land, which sailed for Callao February 20th with a completion of 11 men. The Emma, he said, was delayed and thrown widely south of her course by the great storm of March the 1st, and on March 22nd, in sign latitude 49 degree 51 minutes, W longitude 128 degree 34 minutes, encountered the Alert, manned by a queer and evil-looking crew of Kanakas and half-casted. Being ordered peremptorily to turn back, Captain Collins refused, whereupon the strange crew began to fire savagely and without warning upon the Shuans with a peculiarly heavy battery of brass cannon, forming parts of the yacht's equipment. The Emma's men shrilled fight, said the survivor, and though the schooner began to sink from shot beneath the waterline, they managed to heave alongside the enemy and board her, grappling with the savage crew on the yacht's deck, and being forced to kill them all, the number being slightly superior because of their particular abhorrent and desperate, though rather clumsy mode of fighting. 3 of the Emma crew, including Captain Collins and First Mate Green, were killed, and the remaining 8 under Second Mate Johansen proceeded to navigate the captured yacht, going ahead in the original direction to see if any reason for the ordering back had existed. The next day, it appears, they raised it and land on a small island. Although none is known to exist in that part of the ocean, the 6 of the men somehow died ashore. Though Johansen is queerly reticent about his part of his story and speaks only of their falling into a rock charms. Later, it seems, he and one companion boarded the yacht and tried to manage her, but were beaten about by the storm of April 2nd.
From that time till his rescue on the 12th, the man remembers little, and he does not even recall when William Britton, his companion, died. Britton's death reveals no apparent cause and was probably due to excitement or exposure. Cable advice from Dunedin report that the alert was well known there was an Iceland trader and bore an evil reputation among the waterfront. It was owned by a curious group of half-castes whose frequent meetings and night trips to the woods attracted no little curiosity, and it had set sail in great haste just after the storm and earth tremors of March the 1st. Our archland correspondent gives the Emma and her crew an excellent reputation, and Johansen is described as a sober and worthy man. The Admiralty will institute an inquiry on the whole matter beginning tomorrow, at which every effort will be made to introduce Johansen to speak more freely than he has done hitherto. This was all, together with the picture of the hellish image, but what a train of ideas is started in my mind. There were new treasures of data on the Cthulhu cult and evidence that it has strange interest at sea as well as on land. What motive prompts the hybrid crew to order back the Emma as they sail about with the hideous idol? What was the unknown island on which 6 of the Emma's crew had died, and what about which the mate Johansen was so secretive? What had the Vice Admiralty investigation brought out, and what was known of the noxious cult in Dunedin? And most marvelous of all, what deep and more than natural linkage of dates was this which gave a malign, how undeniable significance to the various turns of events so carefully noted by my uncle. March 1st. Of February 28, according to the international dateline. The earthquake and storm has come. From Dunedin the Alert and her noisome crew had darted eagerly forth as if impressively summoned, and on the other side of the earth poets and artists has begun to dream of a strange, dank, cyclopean city, which a young sculptor had modeled in his sleep the form of the dread Cthulhu. March 23rd, the crew of the Emma landed on an unknown island and left 6 men dead, and on that date the dreams of sensitive men assume a heightened vividness and darken with a dread of a giant monster malign pursues, which an architecture had gone mad, and a sculpture had lapsed suddenly into delirium. And what of the storm of April 2nd, the date on which all dreams of the dank city cease, and Wilcox emerged unharmed from their bondage of strange fever? What of all this, and of those hints of old Castro about the sunken, star-born old ones and their coming triumphs, the fateful cult and their mastery of dreams? Was I tottering on the brink of cosmic horrors beyond man's power to bear? If so, they must be horrors of the mind alone. For in some way the 2nd of April had put a stop to whatever monstrous menace had begun its siege of mankind's soul. That evening, after a day of hurried cabling and arranging, I bade my host adieu and took a train for San Francisco. In less than a month I was in Dunedin, where, however, I found that little was known of the strange cult members who had lingered in the old sea taverns. Waterfront scum was far too common for special mention, though there was vague talk about one inland trip these mongrels had made, during which faint drumming and red flames were noted on the distant hills. In Auckland, I learned that Johansen had returned with yellow hair turned white after a perfunctory and inconclusive questioning at Sydney. and had thereafter sold his cottage in West Street and sailed with his wife to his old home in Oslo. Of his stirring experience, he would tell his friend no more than he has told the Admiralty officials, and all they could do was to give me his Oslo address. After that, I went to Sydney and talked profitlessly with seamen and members of the Vice Admiralty Court. I saw the Alert, now sold and in commercial use, a circular quay in Sydney Cove, but gained nothing from its non-committal bulk. The crouching image, with its cuttlefish head, dragon body, scaly wings, and hierophilic pedestal, was preserved in the Museum of Hyde Park, and I studied it long and well, finding it a thing of battlefieldy exquisite workmanship, and with the same utter mystery, terrible antiquity, and unearthly strangeness of material which I had noted in the glass smaller specimens. Geologists, the curator told me, had found this monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world held no rock like it. Then I thought with a shudder of what old Castro has told Legras about the great ones. They had come from the stars, and had brought their image with them. Shaking with such mental revolution as I had never before known, I now resolved to visit Maid Johansen in Oslo. Sailing for London, I embarked at once for the Norwegian capitals, and one autumn day land at the trim whereas in the shadow of the edge birch. Johansen's address, I discovered, lay in the old town of King Harold, Hardada, which kept alive the name of Oslo during all the centuries that the greater city masqueraded as Christiana. I made the brief trip by taxicab and knocked with palpitant heart at the door of a neat and ancient building with plastered front. A sad-faced woman in black answered my summons, and I was stung by disappointment that when she told me in halting English that Gustav Johansen was no more. He had not long survived his return, said his wife, for the doing at sea in 1925 had broken in him. He had told her no more than he had told the public, but had left a long manuscript of technical matters, as he said, written in English, evidently in order to safeguard her from the peril of casual perusal. During a walk through a narrow lane near the Gothenburg dock, a bundle of papers falling from an attic window has knocked him down. Two Lascar sailors at once helped him to his feet, but before the ambulance could reach him, he was dead. Physicians found no adequate cause for the end, and laid it to their heart trouble and a weakening constitution. I now felt gone as my vitals, the dark terror which never leaves me till I, too, am at rest, accidentally or otherwise. Persuading the widow that my connection with her husband's technical matters was sufficient to entitle me to his manuscript, I bore the document away and began to read it on the London boat. It was a simple, rambling thing, a naive sailor's efforts at a false fractal diary, and strove to recall day by day that last awful voyage. I cannot attempt to transcribe it verbatim in all its cloudiness and redundance, but I will tell it just enough to show why the sound of the water against the vessel's sides became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ear with cotton. Johansen, thank God, did not know quite all, even though he saw the city and the thing, but I shall never sleep calmly again when I think of the horrors that lurk ceaselessly behind life, in time and in space. and of those unhallowed blasphemies from elder stars which dream beneath the sea, known and favored by a nightmare cult, ready and eager to loose them on the world whether another earthquake shall heave the monstrous stone city again to the sun and air. Johansen's voyage had begun just as he towed to the Vice Admiralty, the Emma, in ballast, had cleared Archland on February 20th, and had felt the full force of that earthquake-born tempest, which must have heaved up from the sea bottom the horrors that filled men's dream. Once more under control, the ship was making good progress when held up by the Alert on March 22nd, and I could feel the master's regret as he wrote of her bombardment and sinking. Of the Swansea called Fiends on the Alert he speaks with significant horror. Of the Swansea there was some peculiarly abominable quality about them which made their destruction seem almost a duty, and Johansen shrills ingenuous wonder at the charge of ruthlessness brought against his party during the proceeding of the court of inquiry. Then, driven ahead by the curiosity in the captured yacht under Johansen's command, the men sight a great stone pillar sticking out from the sea, and in latitude 47 degree 9 minutes, with W longitude 126 degree 43 minutes, come upon a coastline of mingled mud, oaths, and weedy cyclopean masonry which can be nothing less than the tangible substance of Earth's supreme terror. The nightmare corpse city of Ryleth, that was built in measureless eons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that sift down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in green slimy vaults and sending out at last, after cycles incalculable, the thought that spread fear to the dreams of the sensitive, and called impetuously to the faithful to come on a pilgrimage of liberation and restoration. All this Johansen did not suspect, but God knows he soon saw enough. I suppose that only a single mountain top, the hideous monolith crowned citadel where Eon Great Cthulhu was buried, actually emerged from the waters. When I think of the extent of all that may be brooding down there, I almost wish to kill myself forthwith. Johansen and his men were awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder demons, and must have guessed with the guidance that it was nothing of this or of any sane planet. At the unbelievable size of the greenish stone blocks and the dizzying height of the great carven monolith, and at the superficial identity of the colossal statue and bas relief with the queer image found in the shrine on the Alert, it poignantly visible in every line of the maid frightened description. Without knowing what futurism is like, Johansen achieved something very close to it when he spoke of the city. For instance, of describing any definite structure or building, he draws only on board impression of vast angles and stone surfaces too great to belong to anything right or proper for this earth, and impictured with horrible image and hieroglyph. I mention his talk about angles because it suggests something Will Cox had told me of his awful dreams. He said that the geometry of the dream place he saw was abnormal, non-Euclidean, and loathsome, redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Now, an unlettered seaman felt the same thing with gazing at the terrible reality. Johansen and his men land at the sloping mud bank on this monstrous acropolis and clambered slippery up over titan oozy blocks, which could have been no mortal staircase. The very sun of heaven seems distorted when viewed through the polarizing miasma, wheeling out from the sea-soaked perversion and twisted menage and suspend lurk luringly in those crazily exclusive angles of carven rock where a second glance showed concavity after the first showed convexity. Something very like fright had come over all the explorers before anything more definite than rock and ooze and weed was seen. Each was half fled had he not feared the scorn of the others, and was only half-heartedly that they searched, vainly, as is proof, for some portable souvenir to bear away. It was Rodisque the Portuguese who climbed up the foot of the monolith and shouted of what he had found. The rest followed him, and looked curiosity at the immersed carved door with the now familiar squid dragon bas relief. It was, Johansen said, like a great barn door, and they all felt that it was a door because of the ornated lintel, threshold, and jambs around it, for they could not decide whether it lay flat like a trapdoor or a slant wise like an outside cellar door. As Wilcox would have said, the geometry of the place was all wrong. One could not be sure that the sea and the ground were horizontal, hence the relative position of everything else seemed phasmally variable. Breeden pushed at the stone in several places without result. Then Donovan felt over it delicately around the edge, pressing each point separately as he went. He climbed interminably around the gross-secure stone molding. That's it, one would call it climbing, if the thing was not, after all, horizontal. And the man wondered how any door in New Universe could be so fast. Then, very softly and slowly, the 8-grade panel began to give inward at the top, and they saw that it was balanced. Donovan slid or somehow propelled himself down or along the jambs and rejoined his fellows, and everyone watched the queer recession of the monstrosity carven portal. In this fantasy of prismatic distortion, it moved anomalishly in a diagonal way, so that all the rules of matter and perspective seemed upset. The aperture was black, with darkness almost material. Lieutenant broadness was indeed a positive quality, for it obscured such parts in the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from its eon-long imprisonment, visibly darkening the sun as it slunk away into the shrunken and gibbous sky on flapping membranous wings. The odor rising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length the quick-eared Hawkins thought he heard a nasty, slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone would listen. Still then it lumbered slobberingly into the sight and groggily squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the thin outside air of that poison city of madness. Poor Johansen's handwriting almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perishes of pure fright in that accursed instance. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysmal of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradiction of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walk or stumble. God, what wonder that crossed the earth! A great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with fever in that telepathic instant. The thing of the idols, the green, sticky spawn of the stars, had awakened to claim his own. The stars were right again, and what an age-old cult had failed to do so by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigintillions of years, great Cthulhu was loose again, and ravening for delight. Free man was swept by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them, if there be any rest in the universe. They were Donovan, Guerrilla, and Angstorm. Parker slips as the other three were pummeling frenziedly over endless vista of green crushed rock to the board, and Johansen swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there, an ankle which was acute but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Britton and Johansen reached the boat and pulled desperately for the alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitating, foundering at the edge of the water. Steam has not been suffered to go down entirely, despite the departure of all hands for the shore, and it was the work of only a few moments of feverish rushing up and down between wheel and engine to get the alert under way. Slowly, amidst the tortured horror of that indescribable scene, she began to churn the lethal waters which, on the masonry of that charnel shore that was not the earth, the titan thing from the start slavered and gibbered like Polypheme cursing the fleeting ship of Odysseus. Then, bolder than the storied Cyclops, great Cthulhu slid gleefully into the water and began to pursue with vast wave-raising stroke of cosmic potency. Britton looked back and went mad, laughing shrilly as he kept on laughing at interval till death found him one night in the cabin which Johansen was wandering deliriously. But Johansen has not given out yet, knowing that the thing could surely overtake the alert until steam was fully up. He resolved on a desperate chance, and, setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning-like on deck, and reserved the wheel. There was a mighty eddying and foaming in the noisome brain, and as the steam mounted higher and higher, the brave Norwegian drove his vessel head on against the pursuing jelly which rose above the unclear fort like the stern of a diamond guillon. The awful squid head, with withering feathers, came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht, but Johansen drove on relentlessly. There was a bustling as of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness as of a cloven sunfish, a stench as of 1,000 open grapes, and of a sound that the chronicler could not put on paper. For an instant, the ship would be foiled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething astern, where, God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn would neverthelessly recombining in its hateful original form, which its distance widened every second as the alert gained impetus from its molten steam. That was all. After that, Johansen only brooded over the idol in the cabin and attended to a few matters of food himself and the laughing maniac by his side. He did not try to navigate after the first bold flight, for the reaction has taken something out of his soul. Then came the storm of April 2nd, and the gathering of the cloud about his consciousness. There is a sense of spectral withering through liquid gulfs of infinity, of dazzling rides to the reeling universe on a comet's tail, and of hysterical plunge from the pit of the moon, and from the moon back to the pit. all livered by a cachinnating chorus of the distorted, hilarious elder god and the green, bad-winking mockling imp of Tartarus. Out of that dream came rescue. The vigilance, the White Admiralty Court, the street of Dunedin, and the long voyage back home to the house by the Edgeburg. He could not tell. They would think he mad. He would write of what he knew before that came, but his wife must not guess. That would be a boon if only it could blot up the memories. That was the document I read, and now I have placed it in the tin box beside the bas-relief and the paper of Professor Andrew. With it shall go this record of mine, this test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon of that the universe had to hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must have ever afterward been poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johansson went, so I shall go. I know too much, and the cult still live. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose. Again, in the charms of stone, which has shielded him since the sun was young. The accused city is sunken once more, for the vigilance sailed over the spot after the April storm, but its ministers on earth still below, and prance and slay around idle-capped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking waves within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunken may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spread over the tottering cities of men. A time has come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that, if I do not survive this manuscript, my executor may put this caution before audacity, and see that it meets no other eye. The end.
Okay. Wow. Quite a story. That was quite a story, quite a journey too. I think. How was it? Okay. Easy từ Easy đọc chat của mọi người cái đã. Ok. Lên level 2 Leon thì nằm viện tâm thần. Ôi, không nói như thế nha. Cái tôi cũng bị bệnh nữa, quýt muốn đấm nhau à. Đầu này hay và kích gì Easy đọc tiếp rồi nên mình gì thêm cái stream này. Bây giờ YouTube đang đề xuất cho tôi một đống Lovecraft ASMR. Sasuke YouTube vẫn còn ở chat ba. Terry, đúng rồi bạn, thôi chiều mai nghe lại một thể rồi sưởi. Nốt chắc với Terry, tạm biệt các tí nô của ta sưởi. Bye bye Terry. Nói gì đấy người đồng cấp Terry. Thích nhảy lên đồn nữ thật à bạn. Terra như nhau thôi, đại chiến hội bàn Terra 2nd of April là trùng hợp hay EC cố tình đấy. Đúng rồi. Trùng hợp đấy. Không ngờ được nên quay lại. Tôi nghĩ là văn bản bị chỉnh. Welcome back, chào mừng con chiên. Sao nãy giờ cứ April 2nd. Được tới đâu rồi, hai cách nói như nhau mà. Chat ba được một lúc rồi. Trang chủ ngữ calm down. Chị tôi đọc trên web khác với bạn cho tôi hỏi EC đọc tới trang nào vậy. What page is reading? It's over now, but okay. Hết nước nóng tính quá, sorry. 20 boys, now 21, thanks, no problem. Thực tập một nửa, tôi không đọc theo trang. Đi hút tí cỏ rồi quay lại được mà. Wait, thôi là còn chơi đụng môi thì có sao mình thử qua được. Làm thì easy cơ. Hả? Chơi đụng thì đụng đi, trong ăn bác hồ. Tôi không ăn AJ thì không hút hít nhé. Im lặng đi người truyền giáo. Nghe Leon rồi đấy không? Pachi căng quá noise bro my god. Cuối cùng chắc ba này đã hiểu được chút ít. Yes, nice. I only see a priestess reading Bible. Chuyện hấp dẫn đấy. Pha thêm giọng của EC cuốn thần tự. Thank you Takardian. Thank you everyone for listening. Nero đại đế tôi cố vài lần rồi mà vẫn không chắc được là cái chuyển động đó là quả khác hay boing 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 mà. Tam pam. Okay. How was it? How was it? Eisei uống nước một tí.
Chu chu chu.
Nghề nghiệp thánh nữ hay là God? Mình là người thường. Bạn chọn nghề nào? Không chọn cái nào cả. Ok, và đó, thưa mọi người, đó chính là Call of Cthulhu của HP Lovecraft. Em sẽ đọc câu thần chú triệu hồi bạch tuộc ở trang 11 được không? Tôi muốn nghe thử. Trang 11 à? Ok. Lui menak sa Cthulhu relax balance nak fatak. Lui menak la Cthulhu relax fatak. In his house at Rayastad, Cthulhu waits dreaming. Cái cách đọc ấy sẽ lấy một chút là từ kiểu hơi lưỡi sẽ hơi líu lại một tí, xong ra đấy là sẽ có nghe lại một chút cái cách đọc của bên Fifth Grandmother của hội Foreigner ấy. Yeah, đại để là thế. Cái gì nhỉ? Câu của Abi là cái gì nhỉ? Nè, kể đi. Biết chưa? Đại để nó là thế. In brightest day, in brightest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, blue Eisei's light. Blue Victory Eisei Vita. Eisei accidentally summon Cthulhu. Đọc cái này hùng hồn lên. Ok. Cthulhu mình lock, Cthulhu Ryak for lock for talk. Ina xuất hiện. Nà. Được thế đã tốt. Thật sự. Nếu Cthulhu thì là câu của Hokusai. Ok. Nhớ Abi có mà nhớ. Hokusai FGONP line. Đây rồi. Tai nghe. Quay màn tai nghe. Yeah, đúng rồi, ok. Vậy thì Ito. On Shichiri Suka Sowaka, on Makashiri and Shinben Sowaka, the heavenly deity, Lord of the universe, O esteemed King of the stars, Waiter of the North Star, and protectors of the 8 corners of the earth, I shall pour all I have into this deliver, my greatest brush stroke. Bear witness, 36 views of Mount Fuji, the great wealth of Kanagawa, my brush dance. Like that? Like that. Như thế ha. Chắc là thế. Maybe. Được chưa? Is that okay? Ai lạ? Hello? Đọc Essence và khi mà Toto sama
cái vừa rồi mình đọc là Eto, nó là novel phantasm. Không, nó là bản translation ở bên NA. Ascend và ok, Ascend. Defeat battle finish. Ế? Sao cái này không có Ascend 3 ta? Kỳ quặc. Battle start, Ascend. Chỉ đến có second ascension. Biết vậy. À đây. Katsushika Hokusai after third ascension. Story. Okay, I changed my pen name to octopus from other planet. Okay. Pasui, on Sorishiska Soska, walked knife clock, Genten who sees through all of creation, O Sakla stumbling in the hall of the ocean of stars, I present you the last of my earnest brush stroke. Come, this is for your Peruso. 36 views of Mount Fuji, the alien sea of Kanagawa rages. Pasui. It's a dreamy state of mind, as if I become a fairy. It's no good, Master Dono. Yet so adorable, I just want to eat you up. How about a kiss to breathe some life into you? Like that? Like that? Maybe?いつだってチクタクとなる世界でなんとなんでさ Ok. Ok. So, vậy thì hôm nay đó chính là Call of Cthulhu của H.P. Lovecraft. So, in the end, that was the Call of Cthulhu novel. Mọi người thấy thế nào? What do you guys think of the story? Mọi người thấy thế nào về câu chuyện? Tất nhiên là có những người đọc bản tiếng Anh và có những người đọc bản tiếng Việt đi. Nhưng mà không biết mọi người thấy như thế nào? Mọi người có được enlightenment là khai sáng. Mọi người có được khai sáng không? Eisei mong là ở một cái nền này nay tôi đánh giá cao EC 8/100. Oh no, sorry. Cảm giác run vào cảm giác wow. Thế là tốt hay xấu ta? Oh no, hôm nay tệ đến thế à? VTWC EC nói gì vậy các bạn? Mình mới chỉ ngồi đọc lại mấy cái line của Hokusai trong Fate thôi. Good evening Eisei Otonashi Kuro. Hello. Bên này mưa to quá, cảm nhận về tác phẩm. Yeah, Eisei đang hỏi mọi người cảm nhận về tác phẩm Call of Cthulhu vừa rồi. Mà ngay lúc đầu nói sao nhỉ? Eisei có nói ngay lúc đầu là chắc chắn là sẽ có chỗ sai. Làm fast stream game Cthulhu một ngày nào đó đi idol. Nãy ấn nhầm chứ ai bully Eisei. Nà, Leo bạn bully Eisei đúng không? Eisei biết mà. Buồn quá. Miền Nam đang rông bão à? Dưới đó đang bão à? Mọi người cẩn thận nhá. Stream game Cthulhu mà tùy tình hình. Cảm nhận là Heaven Feel 32. Ôi. Ok. 8/10 mà thành 8/100, có lỗi quá. Bạn vừa mới làm team với Eisei bị đau đớn đó. Cô tự còn chả có mưa, vẫn đợi last light nha. Yeah, tuần sau thì chúng ta quay lại với last light rồi. Last light Eisei cũng muốn nhanh nhanh chơi last light để lên Exodus lắm. Ok, tuần sau. Còn đâu, ngoài ra thì để gọi cảm ơn các bạn ở trên Discord này, và cảm ơn các bạn ở trên YouTube có comment này. Mặc dù là đọc truyện tiểu thuyết Call of Cthulhu thì cũng chỉ là một cái ngắn thôi, và chúng ta cũng còn có chat với nhau, xong rồi trao đổi qua nghỉ giữa các chapter nữa, có 3 chapter. Nhưng mà stream cũng đã được 2 tiếng rưỡi. Eisei thì như còn nói ban nãy, có một số đoạn Eisei hiểu nhưng mà sẽ không nhớ cái cách đọc, và cũng kiểu khoan từ cái từ này người ta phát âm như thế nào đó, thì thi thoảng cũng sẽ bị gấp. Thì cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe thật sự. Bằng cách đọc lại như thế này thì Eisei cũng có trau dồi thêm cái kỹ năng đọc tiếng Anh của mình mà. Tại vì Eisei muốn kiểu talk like a native, nói như một người bản địa. Ít nhất là thế. Thật ra cũng còn nhiều thứ cần phải trau dồi. Bắt đầu vô mùa mưa rồi. Okakoro gì đến giờ Eisei, đến giờ bully Eisei rồi hả? Lại nữa hả? Mọi người muốn bully như nào hả? Leo Kobayashi dậy trễ lỡ cả buổi stream rồi anh Quang. Bạn có thể kiểu bật stream lên xong rồi kiểu ngồi nghe lại, tại vì nó cũng chỉ là mình ngồi đọc Call of Cthulhu thôi mà. Lôi giáo án bully idol đi các giáo sư. Lại nữa ha, đừng bully nữa. Yep, nhưng xem trên web lộ chất lượng âm thanh tràn lắm, chắc chắn bị phong bản quyền. Chất lượng âm thanh hả? Mà but ok, vậy thì chúng ta sẽ chuyển tạm sang đây đi. Piu. Ok. Ok, đã tắt reverb. Bully là một thú vui tao nhã của cánh đàn ông. Tự hào gớm nhá. Vui nhưng có quyền công dân. Ý ông là Heaven feel free. Rekka, chúc mừng. Cảm ơn Rekka. Chỉ có những gentleman mới bully một cách nghệ thuật được. Đã là ESO thì phải biết bully nữ thần của mình chứ. Talk time. Yeah, talk just a little bit of talking. Then I guess I'll go to sleep soon because ok, boy bị che rồi, cuối cùng sanity cũng tăng lên. Ủa? Chắc vươn gậy. Yeah. Đi chơi nhá. Đã là được rồi, ok. Đó là Eisei thì mình biết bully nữ thần của mình chứ. Mọi người đừng. No. Eisei bị bully đủ rồi. Đừng. Toàn dị giáo thế này. Mấy người dị giáo thật đó. Bong. San chắc có khi fail hết rồi. Toàn dị giáo thế này. bị Cthulhu làm mờ mắt rồi. Protect Eisei. Thank you Rekka. Cảm ơn Eisei đã vòng. Okakoro. Bạn bị mờ hả? Vâng. No bully gì thanh tẩy time.
Eisei no beam. Chu. Chu.
Ok, mọi người đã được xây xô hóa lại. Mong là thế, mong là thế. Sonji no lari harimasa de narirasa de via. Sonji mo lari harimasa de marirasa de sia. Sato sido osadia. Sotoria. Còn cái đấy là còn có cái gì nữa nhỉ? Chắc tao mất tiền nè. Em sẽ đang tìm lại cái file kachi. Đây rồi. Garanodo music. Ongaku. If I cry when. Đây, đúng cái này không ta? Có cái này, Eisei muốn hỏi mọi người, không biết là mọi người có chờ nãy nhắc kiểu Heaven's Feel thì mình tự dưng mình nhớ đến các cái con hàng của Type Moon, thì không biết có ai quen với cái bài nhạc này không? Cái này thì Eisei không chắc là mình nhớ đủ đâu, nhưng mà Satosia nonzia limini savito me so kimia nifeta. Did anyone guess this? Did anyone guess it? Ok. Group làm dị giáo thế các dị giáo tu sĩ xin đừng làm cản, mình không nhân từ mãi đâu. Hồi sinh ra con ông Power, ông không thể nhân từ xem tôi đúng là gì. So you have chosen death. I do. Hay wait, yes. Group này khiến người suy nghĩ về việc fanfic dị giáo hay truyền giáo từ Cardinal Sinners. Yes. Karano Kyokai. Sekai da. Karano Kyokai. The Garden of Sinners. Nhạc của Kajira Yuki. Hổ, bạn đang tiếp cận mình. Leo Kobayashi. Karano Kyokai 8 phần vẫn chưa xem được. Wow, xem thì vẫn nên xem, tại vì nó vẫn là, đối với mình thì nó vẫn là một trong các cái bộ kiểu có visual đẹp nhất, vẫn cả kiểu adaptation kiểu ổn nhất từ hàng của Type Moon lên. Chứ thật sự là cái hồi mà kiểu cái hồi nó mới kiểu Karano Kyokai nó mới chỉ là kiểu cái gì nhở, chuyện novel.
kiểu mình đọc mình thấy bình thường ấy, nhưng mà đến khi mà có cả cái studio người ta vào người ta làm anime với các cái cảnh visual, cảnh đánh nhau, nhất là cái cảnh mọi người nhớ cảnh kiểu Shiki đánh Shiki kiểu sặc mấy con ma ở trên tầng thượng không? Kiểu cái đoạn đánh nhau ở trên tầng thượng đấy kết hợp với cái nhạc đúng kiểu epic ấy. Yeah. Nghe cái này làm tôi nhớ Kobato và cái gì hạnh phúc ấy. Void Power anime đầu tiên là mình khóc. Yeah. Portable là một kỹ công của nhân loại. Yep. Còn đâu hình như là cái này. Không phải, hình như là cái này. Not this. Into the light, no. No, not this one. When the fairy tales and Garanodo Kyogai Shiki. Nope. Garanodo. Đây rồi. Ito. Son ti loi la si fira ti se mi te si da. Son ti mori da si fira e si fide si ha. Wow. Cái đấy vẫn là một trong những cái cảnh visual mà kiểu có đánh nhau với cả lồng nhạc gọi là đỉnh nhất Eisei vẫn phải công nhận luôn. Tại vì kiểu xong cái lúc đúng kiểu cái lúc Shiki nhảy từ trên cao xuống ấy, nhạc lúc đấy nó đang cao trào rồi nhá, xong rồi đấy đến cái khi trượt xuống dưới cái tòa nhà ở bên cạnh ở dưới một tí, xong rồi đấy bắt đầu trượt kiểu xong rồi ok, xong đoạn đó kiểu Shiki đứng dậy vẩy cái tay, xong rồi thử cái tay mà Yoko đúng không nhỉ, Toko, đúng rồi, mà Toko mới làm, xong rồi chĩa về phía linh hồn kia, xong bắt đầu bóp, xong rồi cái gì hãy rơi đi và bùm. Hả? Thành nhớ rõ tới vậy à? Tại vì cái đoạn nó cực kỳ epic mà. Lẫn cả Eisei là kiểu thích nhạc của Kajiura từ lâu rồi ấy. Xong rồi đến cả trước đấy không biết mọi người có nhớ Climb to Tsubasa không nhỉ? Thì Kajiura Yuki cổ cũng viết nhạc cho Climb nữa. Xong rồi đấy ngoài ra thì Kajiura còn là kiểu người đầu quân cho không hẳn là người đầu quân, nhưng mà ý là kiểu người viết lẫn cả thu thập nhóm Calafina. Đó, nhưng mà cái gì nhỉ? Santa Vida
Santa Frisma sa vida lider firma fido si fida 暗闇と中でむつみらう絶望と未来を悲しみと赤くくじ赤う冷たく手は捨てた君の揺れた秘密もフィルレにして青い夜の静けさをゆくラクリモサ遠くふざけて消えた眩しい世界をもう一度愛したい一人の中に夢を尽くして汚れた心に涙が落ちてくるまでBài này thì ở trong credit gì 幻の場所は闇の分け光のある方へ夢という罠が僕たちを葬らていざなう空の上の無慈悲な神々にはどんな叫びも届きがしないラクリモサ僕らを燃え盛る焚き木となりいつかその空を焼き尽くそうラクリモサえラクリモサどこに生まれてきた血濡れた世界を恐れずに愛したい許されるように許し信じて汚れた地上で涙が日々を数えてDòng tiếng ồn xin hân hạnh tới chỗ chương trình này. Sorry, lúc đấy mình không để ý. Sorry. Gomenasai. Shit. Mày đâu người chứ? Không để ý đâu mà. Chứ. Oh no, nghe nó tệ lắm à. No. Kurayami. Hay hát lại. Hay là hát lại. Oh no. Mọi người không nghe được rồi ạ. Calafina thì disband rồi ấy đấy, nhưng mà kiểu sẽ vẫn buồn nữa. Không chịu. Giờ tôi còn nhớ Crossing Field. Đúng rồi. Kajira có viết cho cả SAO nữa mà. Fate anime nhiều OST hay như Emiya's Team This Day Never Again. Chỉ cả cái sau OST là Kajira. Yup. Mà đến giờ chưa biết cái scene khi Excalibur được bật trong game Fate Go tên gì. Có khi người ta nhờ kiểu viết luôn cái mới à, Excalibur. Nghe nói hết cả saga, thêm tí nhạc đến và thêm Perfect Pasta. Dàn tiếng ngôn xin nó này vô lý nghe ổn. Ok. Tôi đã xích một quyền đấy. Ôi nghe có thấy buồn nhỉ. Ok. Tôi đã suýt ngủ quên đấy. Đừng ngủ chứ. Calafin đúng rồi. Cái gì nhở? Magica Madoka. Chúng ta vừa tiếp tục series của Euro Butcher à các bạn. Bài đấy tên gì nhỉ? Kaji Ura Yuki Foko Explosion. Ok. Đúng rồi, Sispuela Magica. Sispuela Magica. Ok. Không biết còn nhớ không nhỉ? Thôi cứ thử phát. 3, 2, 1. Samida dostisa, alina da sida, sonida dostida dola. Este amordita, narimaratira, soria torida sola. Se maniarisi, isola madola. Soribia dolce, irola atima. Samarira dolce, ifarimo ira, fira, sira, dola, sira. Samira dostina, alidana stira, sorira dodima dora. Estira modrita, narivara stira, soria torida sola. Se maria risi, isola matora. Sobiria dolce, iroda razima. Samarira dolce, ifira nivora. Fira, sira, vida la dora. Semira lastida, irosama sora, subira dolce da sola. Samirai doshida, hamirai nosida, sumira si donna sora. Se maria leshi, isora matora. Soribira dolce, irora matida. Samarira dolce, ifira mirola. Ira, fira, sida, dona. How is that? How was it? Magia đúng không nhỉ? Một skill hết mana rồi. Mana Eisei đã được 2 explosion. Mazan rồi sao ai như mầm kia. Cosmic explosion. Cosmic explosion. Có hai thứ nghe là tụt EQ Exclusion của Megumi và BGM của Hoa Quả. Sao mà được cả sự assassin của Excalibur trong video. Ok. Atarasia. Ok, có cánh cổng không gian làm gì? Nhớ hồi xem 8 tập Madoka trong một buổi sáng. Trả lời qua Multiverse Mind và cực mạnh. Còn chưa xem movie nữa. Bà chị. Thank you. Còn gì nữa nhỉ? Kajiura Yuki Foko. Còn bài gì nữa nhỉ? Hình như trong Karanokyo Kai có cái gì nhỉ? Snow is falling à? Qua ngày mới rồi à? Omedeto, chúng ta đã qua ngày mới rồi. Pachi. Khoan, từ lại 3 tiếng đồng hồ. Tuyệt vời lắm Eisei. Thank you Otonashikuro. Hồi trước có thời gian không coi, giờ muốn coi mà thời gian say no. Eisei cũng muốn xem nhiều anime ca mùa cũ lắm nhưng mà cũng không có thời gian. Mọi người chúc mừng ngày mới. Đi ngủ thì seitan. Ok. Trước khi đấy nốt shining days. Ala, lyrics. Where's the lyrics? No, not this one. Just always smile and seize the day. Shiny days. 新しい風集もうステップと今日 my way brand new breeze restore しそうだ Yeah, okay. Đúng chưa nhỉ? This one? Bum 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 dun 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 bum 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 choo 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 窓をかけたら A bright light 優しい日差しいっぱいに浴びて好きな夢やら So day by day bit by bit 胸に溢れてゆく変わらない日々の扉と開け光のどこまで Light の始まりの一歩Shiny days 新しい風弾むようなステップ踏んで Go my way Can you feel 透き通る空胸咲き連れてく Your new world Listen to the melody と口中で響かせなら飛び出そうまいでShiny days 新しい風弾むようなステップ踏んで Go my way Can't you feel 透き通る空胸が騒ぎが連れてく Brand new world Listen to the melody と口笛で閉じばそうだ飛び出そう未来へ Okay Yes là stream 3 tiếng Ok, stream 3 tiếng rồi Ok, chop Easy sẽ đọc nốt comment của mọi người Nido đại đế thật tuyệt vời để đón chào một ngày mới Yep, it's a brand new day Mà, đúng không? Ok, Úi chà, mưa to gió lớn kèm cả sấm sét đến đây hơi dài rồi đây. Eisei ngày mới vui vẻ nhá. Ok, thank you Otonashikuro. Dưới đấy đang mưa gió và mưa to gió lớn thì mong mọi người ở dưới chỗ nào mà đang mưa hay là bão hay là các thứ thì mọi người cẩn thận nhá. Ok, Happy New Day là Mouse Aluminium. Chỗ tôi cũng đang nổi gió rồi. Brand new day, brand new world. Chỗ tôi nóng đến mức quạt phun ra lửa. Shining Day 222 bí tưởng hát chắc xây tán hát mấy bài cũ bên HTV3. Cách nào có nhiều nhạc mà cái gì nhỉ? Kobato music đúng không nhỉ? Which one was it? This one I think. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. tan tan tan. Haru hi saku hana, natsu hirogaru sora o kokoro no naka ni kizamarete kirameku. Asahi furu ame, mado wo tozatsu hi ni mo, mune ni afureru hikari wa kumo no ue. Yorokobi kanashimi subete idai de aruiteru watashi no te to kimi no te wo tsuyoku tsunagu mono. Dạ, Ito, đến giờ mình vẫn nhớ lời Ya ashita yakuru hi Ope Naruto hatebeba hay. Đến giờ mình vẫn nhớ lời nghe quán nghe phát là tự hát được qua viết sắp ok nhất. Ya Tiến ta lại nhớ tới thất kiều anh hùng. Ok. Pam 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 pam. Đừng khóc cho nước mắt rơi. Sao nước mắt lại rơi? Hôm nay chúng ta có nhiều thứ vui à? Dạ. Thế nên đừng buồn, đừng khóc. Cái gì nhở? Mọi người có xem ẩn tàng thư của Dantalia không? Dantalia no Shokai. OP của nó cũng khá là hay. Xong rồi có thêm cả giọng xong có thêm cả giọng đọc của Ono Daisuke nữa. Hồi xưa Eisei khá là thích giọng của Seiyu Ono Daisuke, tại vì kiểu ông trước tiên là đầu tiên là Eisei thích ổng là từ bên Umineko. Ông ấy lồng giọng cho Butler Ushiromiya đó. Xong sau đấy là đến khi kiểu sang mấy cái như kiểu Dantalia này, xong rồi đến cả bên cái gì nhở, Dantalia, xong rồi Ito Black Butler Kuroshitsuji. Đúng rồi, ok. Ý ông là bài opening. Ok. Lyrics opening Naruto tiến đạt. God say. Ok, khó quá. Ok, Dantalia no Shoka. Lyrics. Nốt bài này xong chắc chúng ta cũng ngủ thôi. Ono Daisuke Jotaro. Yeah, it's him. Ono Daisuke. Nốt OP của ẩn tàng thư Dantalia no Shoka nha. Khoan từ từ uống nước cái đó. Dun, dun, da, 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 dun, da, da, ba, da, 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 dun, dun, la, 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 na, tum homo declate solenar curreten letivissista mimos grat like no glide astres flipos acusum homus clisate soleban evosita leda waffen gingalen adidas co kaeliman avlinoman tambolen macedelomis nilidisino igolinanes comesin tomisina cape flutide ni igro gladles minutes disinsi soge solenon contea mia deselas nova so de la fo da 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 da月は静かに語る誰にも聞こえる声で繰り返す潮の満ち引き消えるゆく記憶の情景星は密かに白く誰にもわからぬ文字で無限の言葉は渦巻き線の奥の本が生まれた僕には空が広すぎて時を刻みは早すぎたで何も知らぬまま虚しく集めた言葉も土の中に朽ちるだけそれでも僕は叫ぶわけのわからず声の上げるせめて響き果てに届け日もやがて昇るだろう卑屈な闇が答えた未来を見た者がいないと僕は恐怖に手伸ばし冷たい風をつかむ絶望を吹き抜けろ夢を苦悩もうすべて過去へ地層がまどろむ革命の中に僕は前に進むまだにむ明日へSorry. Wait. Comment. Ron nước ASMR lấy giọng ASMR mà weed ngủ rồi à? Hey, say hi again. Hello Suzune. Welcome. What time is it over there? It's 12:14 a.m. in here. I hope you're gonna have a nice weekend too. Eisei có thuộc bài nào bên Libby không? Chắc là có bài ở trong cái gì nhỉ? Vùng đất linh hồn Spirited Away, maybe? Eisei hát về Viết ngủ gật rồi. Nikori hello again, nhà truyền giáo cùng trước nữ thần của chính mình. Hi, met another overseas friend. Chỉ có chị giáo mới đủ khả năng chịu được hào quang của nữ thần thôi. Hi Susune. Hello Susune. Sáng nay truyền giáo tôi đi bully. Perfect balance. Hi Susune, chào again truyền giáo. Thì Eisei vừa nhắc đến mình à? Comment review. Hi Nikori. Gì đó nghĩa vụ cái gì rồi? Không, là tôi liều. Well, today we like the title. Today we have a ASMR stream where I read Call of Cthulhu novel by H.P. Lovecraft, and the name of life. After that, I spent some time talking with them, but then now it's 3 hours
nearly 3 hours. So, 命の名前 名前 đúng cái này không nhở? I'm learning how to do ASMR too. Did you prepare a script? Yesterday was April Fool's Day, right? So while streaming, I did some like stage play. I didn't prepare anything, so I just go along with the flow. Like I was pretending to be a girl who gonna give confession to the chat, and it was something like this. Please, Doga, please accept my chocolate. I really love you. Would you be my lover? Please wait. Don't answer right away. Please don't look at me. I'm too embarrassed to face you right now. Just give me the answer in the afternoon, okay? I'll wait for you at the usual place. So, yeah. Yeah, kiểu đó. Yeah, it was something like that. Like for ASMR, we can do a lot of stuff. Like for example, we can have a sound with a cup, or even just pouring water ASMR, like someone has said above. You can. I think that the problem with ASMR that you have to let the chat, the viewer, immerse into the situation or the environment that you create. So yeah, I'm always trying my best to give them the best stage play situation possible. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Lighter. This one's for you and me. Even now our dreams, we're alright where we should be. Lift my arms out wide, I open my eyes, and now all I wanna see is a sky full of lighter, a sky full of lighter. Yeah, okay. ASMR lighter. 3, 2, 1, 2. Something like that. Yeah. So like for the basics of the ASMR, we should have the headline. Yeah, the headline, and then we decide what we're gonna do for the ASMR stream. Like for example, you could do a stage play on Valentine's Day or something like that. Like, and yeah, and then to keep the realistic elements, I think after that it's just us trying to improvise with this situation. Yeah, kind of like that. She had quite a vivid imagination, made stuff out of thin air. I see. Thanks for the tips. No problem. Chocolate with hair. No, chat, stop. And with love, water, and new and blood, lighter ASMR. Your voice is calming. Thank you, Suzuki. And you, chat, stop being bottom left. Stop it. Get some help. Yeah, right. Just get some help, man. She's already calm. Play horror game. No big deal. Horror. Like for the horror game, it had the jump scare, and it can scare you. Like because it's the element of surprise, right? But if it's gonna haunt you, and if it's gonna leave you like awake during the night or something like that, I don't think I would, because during my childhood, I have so many I watched so many war and like battlefield film, so it's that those kind of thing has more horror than the horror of the war, the horror of blood, guns, bomb and stuff, all the things like that, and you hear people screaming and stuff. It's more, it's so much horrible than the horror thing, and in Vietnam, this thing I said yesterday, but in Vietnam we usually pay tribute to our ancestors, and those who have already flew to heaven, and also those from the war time, they sacrifice their life and use for the freedom and the liberty of our country. Therefore, in my opinion, there's nothing I need to scare, since everywhere in Vietnam there are traces of the soldiers, of those who fight for the freedom of our country. So you are the one who need help. Childhood story strike again. Come on, guys. I'm just sharing my story. Okay. That should be enough for today, right? Okay. It's nearly 3 hours and 30 minutes. Yeah. I'm just gonna yawn for a little bit. Sorry. Raise your hands up high into the sky. Yeah. Here we go again. 3 giờ mẹ 20 phút luôn. Another shatter dream. Do that again. Do what? The horror? Tôi tự hỏi khi nào mình mới ngồi học được để ngồi học được tầm này thời gian. Sleep time. What? Pune?
어떡할래?
Pune. Ủa? Nãy làm gì có cái pune nào nhỉ? Tự dọn. Okay, that should be what? Okay. Vươn vai. Lonely mood, please. Nice Nero Pro lên phường anh ơi. Okay, gì vẫn có vẫn blur quá. Okay, I think that should be fine for today. Back to normal. Yeah, okay. Like always, thank you everyone for attending today's ASMR reading stream with Eisei. I read The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft. Thank you so much for attending, and although I still have a lot to improve on my pronunciation and other stuff, but I hope you have a great time following the stories and immersing yourself into the horror, the insanity of The Call of Cthulhu. Yeah.
You tried Okakoro, cảm ơn Easy và stream nhé. Yeah, cảm ơn mọi người cũng đã đến và tham gia buổi stream ngày hôm nay mà Easy đọc Call Cthulhu bằng tiếng Anh. Mặc dù sẽ còn phải cải thiện nhiều về phần phát âm pronunciation. Tại vì có nhiều từ đúng là kiểu có hơi chút chuyên ngành và kiểu trong sinh hoạt bình thường hàng ngày mình cũng không sử dụng nhiều ấy. Nhưng mà thôi không sao. Lên XT, thank you AC, thank you my lady. Không biết AC mấy chấm IELTS nhỉ? Haha, không nói đâu. Good morning, cảm ơn vì 3 tiếng 25 phút stream. Yeah, tự kỷ time. Hả? Sao lại tự kỷ? Liệu AC sẽ luôn dõi theo mọi người lại, yên tâm. Thanks for the stream, Eisei. Yeah, thank you guys all. Tomorrow will be wait, is today? Yeah, tonight will be wait, what is yeah, ukulele and chill. Tonight it will be ukulele and chill session. So I will practice some song and some chords progression on the ukulele, and then we can have a comfy stream tonight. I'll try my best. Okay. Ok, thì đại để là tối nay, tại vì bây giờ sang ngày mới rồi mà đúng không? Thì tối nay sẽ có stream Music and Chill cùng với cả mọi người như thường lệ. Thì Eisei sẽ tập thêm mấy cái chord progression nữa cho nó kiểu nghe cho nó calm và nó chill các thứ. Và chúng ta sẽ lại có thể là ngồi lại kiểu dĩ nhiên là ngồi hát với nhau rồi, xong rồi ngồi tập đàn các thứ nữa. Nhưng mà vẫn comfy and chill như thường lệ thôi. Có gì thì mọi người nhớ để ý tới một bức thư sẽ được gửi tới bạn nhé. Và một cánh cổng portal nào đấy sẽ được mở ra trước mắt bạn. Itu chúa thể xây dựng ok tonight 700 subs hơn 3 tiếng stream perfect night. Yeah, hôm nay có khá nhiều người subscribe. For all the new subscribers, thank you very much for subscribing. Although I still haven't got that much of the content on my channel yet, but I'll be sure to improve over time. Thank you so much. Gửi tới các bạn subscribe mới đăng ký theo dõi kênh của Eisei. Mặc dù Eisei chưa có nhiều content ở trên kênh cho lắm, mình vẫn thấy thế. Nhưng mà cảm ơn các bạn đã ghé qua stream và kênh của Eisei. Eisei sẽ cố gắng cải thiện hơn và cải thiện hơn trong tương lai để đem tới cho mọi người nhiều các content thú vị hơn. Ok. Quái kiệt, IL nicer kiểu gì cũng talk show trá hình. Yeah, mong là thế. mong là không đến mức như thế, nhưng mà sẽ cố gắng hát thôi mà. Nhưng kiểu gì cũng thế. Tiên tri tôi được tới với talk show và hát là bản sắc rồi. Hôm nay Niro đại đế hôm nay có mỗi 2 người vào Discord thôi, và Discord đi mọi người. Eisei có Discord và mọi người có thể tham gia vào và kiểu chia sẻ về đời sống các thứ. Đặc biệt có cái này Eisei cũng muốn thông báo với mọi người nữa là chắc là có thể là trong khoảng trong tháng này. Hôm nay mới có hôm nay vẫn tính là đầu tháng mà thì có thể là tuần sau hoặc tuần sau nữa Eisei trong Discord có một phần mục nó là Comfy Zone. Thì chỗ đấy nó là nơi để các bạn chia sẻ những hình ảnh và thước phim đem lại sự thoải mái về cái đẹp của thế giới xung quanh bạn. Ví dụ như phong cảnh hoa là phố phường, các thứ. Và mong mọi người nhớ kèm theo caption. Thì nếu có thể Eisei nếu mà mọi người muốn thì Eisei cũng muốn kiểu các bạn chia sẻ về cuộc sống xung quanh bạn. Như đã nói, nó có thể là hình ảnh ở một góc con phố đẹp nào đấy mà tự dưng bạn đi ngang qua, hay thậm chí chỉ là kiểu một buổi trưa bình thường tại trường của bạn hay là ở công ty của bạn, xong tự dưng bạn thấy sao tự dưng mọi thứ bình yên thế nhỉ. Kiểu đó thì Eisei muốn là kiểu show trình chiếu cho mọi người ở trên stream các chia sẻ của mọi người như thế. và chúng ta có thể cùng chia sẻ sự comfy này đến cho tất cả những người khác. Ví dụ như hôm nay ở trên Comfy Zone thì hôm nay thì chúng ta có Soda, bạn ý có chia sẻ hình ảnh về Đà Lạt vào lúc sáng sớm. Lâu lắm Eisei cũng không lên Đà Lạt, thế nên nhìn cũng kiểu tao cũng muốn lên lại quá. Kiểu Đà Lạt rất là thanh bình ấy. Xong rồi Oji thì có chia sẻ hình ảnh về con mèo nhà bạn ý, kiểu nó flop và nó xù nữa, các thứ. Thì kiểu trông rất là đáng yêu, mặc dù hình như có vẻ là con mèo nó đã bị tỉa lông rồi, chứ Eisei nhớ hồi xưa là nó còn kiểu xù lông nữa cơ. Một mèo stream lại dài ra cái đậu. Ôi tội ước gì cuộc đời tôi như thế nào cơ. Cuối cùng con mèo cũng bị tẩy lông. Mèo bị cạo lông. Không hẳn là bị cạo lông, nhưng mà ý là kiểu nó bớt xù như hồi trước rồi ấy. Đó, thì đại để là thế nhá. Thì có gì mong mọi người cũng kiểu chia sẻ và để ý hơn. Tại vì một trong những cái mà Eisei muốn làm đó là kiểu cho mọi người để ý tới những điều bình dị, những điều đẹp đẽ ở cuộc sống xung quanh bạn hơn mà. Sống chậm lại, nghĩ khác đi, yêu thương nhiều hơn. Đó, thì là thế thôi. Thế nhá. Chào nè. Bye bye. Thank you so much for coming to the stream. Otsukaresama deshita. じゃあ、またこの今日の晩ね。はい。じゃあね。Mua. Chú ôm mọi người. Chú. Ok. Oyasumi mọi người. Chú. 3, 2, 1. The observatory is now closed. Đài Thiên Văn bây giờ sẽ đóng cửa. Chào. Mata ne.